Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
And welcome to this midweek podcast. Normally our midweek podcasts are roundtables, as you probably know if you're a regular listener to the show, but what I did this time was a little bit different. I invited Steve Stockton on, who you may know from his many books about strange things in the woods. And we had a listener story. This series of experiences from Sysco. And Sysco has been on one of our listener stories shows in the past, but she had a lot more to talk about. As a matter of fact, so much we'll probably end up bringing her back for another part because this went pretty long, and there was still a bunch of stuff she had written me about that we hadn't gotten to. So I thought this went very, very well. It's different, and Steve, in a lot of ways, just kind of runs this one, and he did a great job. So, with no further ado, here is Sysco, myself, and Steve Stockton talking ghosts and other weird stuff. And this is a listener story show, and we have back with us Sysco. Hello.
Hello.
And you joined us once before to talk about a Civil War ghost you encountered.
Yes, I did.
And you have a bunch of others that you wanted to share, so I figured we'd dedicate a show to your stories, and I've brought Steve Stockton in to help us out.
Good evening, everybody.
Author of Strange Things in the Woods and More Strange Things in the Woods. And what's the one about your experiences, Steve?
My Strange World.
That's it. All right. All right. So
what a wonderful world it is.
Stranger the better.
Exactly.
Yes, you know it.
And Sysco, you are based out of where?
I am in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
I was born here, but I lived quite a long time in the South in Alabama. I was stationed there in the Army, and when I got out, I stayed there. It was so beautiful, and then came back here recently in the past 5 years. So a little bit all over.
Okay. So what, were you always interested in paranormal stuff?
Absolutely. It was just like everybody else, I believe, when you get talking about these things, you usually had some kind of an occurrence that just changed your world and whipped it around when you were young. And myself, I always wanted to understand more about it. I believe Steve's was the child ghost that you saw. And it came around the car or something, you said, and then it was running, and then it just fell.
The apparition of a child came from behind the car at a stop sign. I could see the driver. The driver didn't see what I was seeing. He just pulled out and drove on. Kid runs down into the yard. It's like he's running too fast, loses control, falls, boom, gone. Didn't take my eyes off the spot, walked right to it. There's nothing there. I even went and got a shovel and dug a hole just to make sure. But it was like, it didn't scare me, but it was just like, that's not supposed to happen. What did I just see? And that just sort of gave me lifelong interest in paranormal.
And what about you, Sysco?
Exactly. The same type of thing. I didn't grab a shovel, but I thought that was so interesting the way you said that. I had heard you say that in another interview, and I said, well, that started his investigation when you grabbed that shovel. And you haven't stopped since, right? And with me...
Exactly.
Right, and with me, I was probably about 3 or 4, and this one it still gets me to today. The earliest thing I can remember, everything is larger when you're a child, so you have to take into account when I say big, huge bed. It was probably regular size, king size bed, but apparently I was put in for a nap, and it was in my parents' room, and they had these shuttered doors. It was an old farmhouse, and I'm going to say it was somewhere between 150 and 180 years old at the time. It was in Jackson, New Jersey, And out here, we had a lot of Revolutionary War battles and just skirmishes all over the place. So, you ask where's the battleground, you're standing on it, just like in Gettysburg or anywhere else. So we're there, and I'm asleep, and something woke me up. I still don't know what. And I'm just sitting up in the middle of this huge bed. And there's some scratching or some ruckus going on in the closet. Now, these shuttered doors was probably, you could probably open them from both sides, and there was like maybe 2 or 3 panels to each one, covering almost the whole wall. And there was a light coming from underneath the shutters. And it came up and out at the same time. I don't know how to describe it, but it was almost like it was growing inside the closet. So it was pushing through the slats of these shutters, and it was coming towards me. And eventually it started filling up the whole closet, and the light was coming out at the same time. And out of the light that was coming out towards me, it started to create like a mist, I want to say. There started to get color in the light. And very quickly, it formed a face. And this is a very large face. It's not a regular size face of a person. This was large, like it almost took up half of the center of the closet. And as it came towards me, it got bigger and bigger and more distinct in the features. I could see the face, and I could see that it had brown hair, and it was put back like a ponytail, but it was a male, and it had its eyes closed as it came towards me, and it got a little bit more distinct in the features, a little sharper. And as it got right in front of me, this big head, no body, just a head, it opened its eyes and its mouth at the same time as if to scream, but no sound came out. It was just kind of like a rush of, now I would say energy, then I would say wind. And in the ponytail, it went like it rushed at me. And I think the only thing I could do at the time to get away from it was just fall backwards. And I saw it go over me, but when it opened its eyes, I would say the eyes were red. It was a red light that came from them. It wasn't like it had eyes like you and I, and the eyes were red. It was more like a light that came out of them. And when it went over me, and it went into the wall and went through the wall, it had a red ribbon. And I remember laying there thinking the ribbon matched the eyes, is all I can remember saying, because the red ribbon, the red eyes. So I'm screaming, obviously. And I remember my mother and my sister came bustling in the door at the same time. And of course, they picked me up and they're, what's wrong with you? And they're not listening to me. And I said, it had eyes. It had red eyes and it had a red ribbon. And there's a funny part to this. This is pretty frightening, right? Was they put you down and they're talking, she didn't calm down, you had a dream, it's all that kind of stuff. But then they were talking, and I remember my sister saying, the red ribbon, I told you, Mom, the red ribbon in his hair. So obviously my sister had seen something too, but in this household, there was 4 sisters, all much older than me. I was the baby, late in life kind of child. And everybody was teenagers by the time I was born. There was 4 sisters and a brother. And my father, who was a World War II veteran, and he unfortunately had an issue with a lot of drinking. And back then, we didn't say PTSD then, we said shell shock.
Right.
And you didn't stir up Dad. Your normal day, you just kind of went about your business, and he did not allow you to talk about this. And that's why I think there was a big kibosh put on the whole thing, that everybody kept it a secret. And of course, this was this early 60s. It's not like today where, hey, I saw an orb. You can talk about it, But that was what started me. And the hush-hush of it and hearing whisperings of it. And a lot of things went on in that house. There was a lot of apporting and things missing and lots of fuss going on in the middle of the night. And my sister had seen, I'm sorry, I'm just telling this whole story, Steve. I don't mean to take up your time. But the other thing that was very distinctful, and there was a lot of things that went on, but I'm only going to tell you things I saw or was witness to. not so much of what they were saying and what I overheard. But the, we were kind of used to, because of my dad having nightmares and dreams and getting up, and he would fight things that weren't there. Maybe they were now. I didn't know then. But he would, there'd be a lot of commotion at night. Sometimes you get woke up out of bed. What's up now? And it was kind of funny because you'd hear all this going on, and everybody had something by their bed. I can remember my sister was an avid golf player, and she would jump out of bed and grab a golf club, and my brother would grab a bat, and my other one would grab a shoe, and everybody would wind up in the hallway and wonder which way to go. This night, my sister is the only one who had her own bedroom. These are big farmhouse, thick doors, not like doors are today, when doors were doors. And she's in her room screaming. There's a man in my room, and they can't get the door open. And my father at this time and my oldest brother, they were at the door, and everybody's in the hallway. I'm on somebody's hip. I was still a little kid. And they're just yelling at her, open the door. Well, finally she got up and she unlocked the door, and I saw the little bit when the door flung open. I see her jump back in bed and pull the covers up, and she's pointing. And right before she went to bed that night, I was already pestering everybody, and I was supposed to be in bed, and she was the last one I saw that night, and she had just done a report for high school. Now, if you remember, Steve, you're around my age, so you remember back in the day when you had to do homework and you had to typewrite it, the old typewriters that you'd push the button and the ribbon would come up.
Uh-huh.
We only had one in the whole house. So when they did their high school reports, they really took care of them because it took so much tedious work to get it done. And she had just finished her report that night, and she handed off the typewriter to another sister. And she was fixing herself up to go to bed and was putting Noxema on her face. And I remember pestering her for some, and she had put some on my nose, and she put the lid on real tight and set it up on this high bureau dresser that she had. And there was a mirror above it right next to the report, and toddled me off to bed. And that's the last I saw of her that night until the screaming. So when they opened the door, my mom just went, and put her hand over her face. You never know what was going to happen. And my sister, who had me, looked around the corner, and you could see the report that my sister had done the night before. Some of it was balled up, some of it was ripped up. There's papers all over the floor. There was a paper from the report stuck to the mirror with Noxema, and Noxema smeared all over the glass and the dresser, and a big handprint on the mirror.
Wow.
And my mom is yelling, get her out of here, get the baby, that. I was always took away at the best times. When you're a kid, you're made to leave, But my sister wouldn't leave, so I got to see a little bit more. Now, there's a lot of scrambling and hubbub, and she's still screaming, and she's crying, and she's pointing, towards the stuff. And my dad's yelling at her, going, what have you done? What did you do? There's a lot of that going on. And my brother takes his hand and puts it next to the handprint and said, Dad, it wasn't her, it's bigger than mine.
Wow.
Meaning she couldn't have done that. Door was locked. There was one window, and it's 3 floors up. So there was a lot of little investigation going on, and my dad's still upset, and he's yelling, and everybody's just upset. And my brother said something about, look, somebody could have come in the window. They checked it. It was locked. And he went and got a flashlight, and he was going out to check. It had snowed that night. And when he came back up those stairs, the look on my brother's face, my brother was 6'2". My dad was 6'4". They were big guys. And to see them, the color come out of their face when they realize, like, you have all these explanations that must be what happened. And then them realizing it couldn't be that. We don't have an explanation. And I remember my mom and dad kind of fought a little bit, and then he left, and he said, I can't put up with any of this nonsense. You're all making me crazy. And he leaves. And everybody is trying to figure out how that handprint got on there. And I was taken out of the room, and that's the last I remember about that. Because, again, you didn't talk about this in the house. So, unfortunately, after that, my mom and dad soon after that got a divorce. Everybody split up, and we weren't all together. Like the older kids went off and did their thing and stayed with different people, but it was just myself, my mom. Years later, we had left the states, and it was probably about 20 years later. I had my first child, and we got together for a reunion, and we're all sitting around the table, and we start bringing up old stuff. And one of my sisters looks over and says to the most of us were there. One of my sisters had passed, but most of us were there. And she said, we're talking about the old farmhouse. And she says, does anybody remember the ghost? Right away, my ears perk up. This is the first time in so many years we're going to talk about it, you know? So I'm listening. Well, one of my sisters, the one that had been in the bedroom that night, she had been looking at a family album or pictures or something. She slammed that thing closed, and I'm not talking about this. She leaves the room, which to me put an exclamation point on the whole situation, you know. And they start talking about the guy that they saw and the woman, the man that she had seen in her room because she had confided in another sister. He was a Revolutionary War looking outfit, a uniform with a ponytail, brown hair, and supposedly he had shown up in her room several times. And my brother leaned over and says, does anybody remember what Dad found in the pantry? Well, this was an old farmhouse, and she wanted a bigger pantry, and I guess my dad finally caved in and decided he was going to make the pantry larger. They knocked out a wall. Guess what they found? Little hidden room off the pantry that had been closed up. And when you knocked out the wall, there was they used to have a thing, Steve, maybe you'll know, what do they call it, a servant staircase or something, like would go from the kitchen right up to like the master?
The back stairs, yeah. A lot of times they have that from the kitchen up to the master bedroom.
Yep, and that's exactly what it was.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she was in the big bedroom, and she was in the one way up. So it went from the kitchen, and sure enough, it ended, you followed up the stairs, and it ended in the back of her closet.
Huh.
Right? So, yeah, I get chills just thinking about it, right? So my other sister said, did you ever know about the stuff that, that Dad found in there? Because now when you've got a farmhouse, you burn stuff. You got garbage, you burn it,
Right.
That's like a big thing, to burn garbage in your yard. It's like a
that
right.
was always one of my jobs when I was a kid. I loved it, especially if there was a hairspray can in there.
Absolutely. And the stuff that would blow up, it was awesome. It was just, good times. So they had a thing going because all the scrap they were tearing off, they throw it right in the fire. My brother was helping. Well, they supposedly found stuff in the room. Now, I never saw it, but they were talking about it that night. And my brother said that they found papers. And yes, some of the papers, he said, were wrapped with a red ribbon. Now, you tell me. I never saw that. That's what they said that night. And my sister was so upset by it, which when you've got older people that were in the house and they saw stuff like this, so, your mind can just go crazy with stuff like that. Was there somebody hidden in a room? Is that where they passed? Were they mad because of this? So that story started me when I was young, and then really fueled it again later when all the pieces started to fall together, and they were talking about all the things that were missing. Like apparently one Thanksgiving there was a bunch of pies in the kitchen that they had been baking, and they went to go set the Thanksgiving table and came back and the pies were gone and all the doors were locked from the inside with those little hook and eye locks. You can't lock them from the outside unless you cut a hole in the screen. I mean,
Right.
stuff like that would make them very upset. So that's the type of stuff that fueled me. And I think in my heart, that was one of the things where I started getting compassion in a way, where I always looked at if we are talking about a human spirit, and right now that's what I'm talking about, somebody who passed and for whatever reason got stuck, not just a loop, but actually stuck. To try to help, I just kind of look at it differently. I mean, if it was my kid or something else, and I was always a big Hans Holzer fan, and that kind of spirit rescue kind of thing. Like, I really want to understand it, And if can you imagine if a soldier like that had been stuck for that amount of time, and just, of course, if he was angry and trying to get attention, in the only way it knew how, and now there's no way to go back and help him. I mean, the house is gone. There's a development on the land, and that kind of breaks my heart a little bit, when you think about it like that, humanize it.
Yeah.
And that's what's really fueled me to try to understand.
Was there anything on the papers, anything written, any instructions, or like a diary, or anything that would have pointed to somebody?
I know. Wouldn't you just love to know? I don't know because
like to know what they burned. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you look back, the way my dad was, he was like one of those people that, and unfortunately he's gone now too, so I can't ask him. I lost everybody pretty early, that I could ever answer a lot of those things, but everybody was just so scared of my dad and not getting him angry. If he says, we're not talking about this, it didn't happen. You know what I mean? You just shut up and walked away. And apparently, whatever he found in there, he gave to my brother and told him to go throw it on the pile with the scrap.
Wow.
He wasn't a historian. He didn't care about stuff like that. That was something he didn't understand. Like, I've heard enough of this trash. We're not talking about this, which is why everything was so hush-hush in there. I found out a lot later, and stories that different things happen. And quite honestly, I think I mentioned it in my email to Soraya. I honestly believe, and I'm not an expert in any way. I've had some experiences, and I try to do what I can do now, and I have a small amount of ability, which is nothing compared to a lot of people I know. I think we all really have that ability, but I've kind of thought a little bit like maybe, just maybe, if that was an angry spirit of some kind, wouldn't my dad, drinking as much as he was and already emotionally damaged with things he was going through, he might have been an easy target for some type of oppression or
that's exactly
instigation.
What I was thinking, like a spirit oppression. Something
Exactly.
that would drive him and increase his rage. And
Exactly.
wow. Now, after you found the secret room and destroyed the contents and stuff, did it continue? Did it get worse? Did it go away forever? Or do you know?
My dad definitely got worse, but you can't really pinpoint it on that. Was it just because of different things he saw he couldn't understand? Was it something he was going through? Was it his own, mental illness or whatever you want to call that? I can't really pinpoint it. And I know what my brother doesn't really want to talk about it. He gets, I don't know if you ever saw Frighteners, but when you start mentioning that house, there was a guy in that movie that just, like you mentioned certain things, and he just crumbles. He's got to change the subject. He can't
Were
wrap his
there
head
any
around
more sightings or experiences within the house after those things were taken out?
There was a lot of things like I said, there was a lot of apporting, stuff missing. I mean, when you walk out of the kitchen and just long enough to take plates to a table, for the kitchen, huge kitchen with Ben Franklin stove and two screen doors which were locked. And the way I always took stuff was to watch my mom's face. If my mom was scared, everybody was scared because my mom was the rock, and when she'd just sit down and put her hand, her head in her hand and just like, I can't do this. I can't understand this, there was a lot of that going on. And then, if I was little and there was something that just happened, you'd walk in the room and they'd quit talking about it, but, there were things that, would go missing, big things, 5 pies, maybe 6 pies that were just baked. And these weren't, Mrs. Smith pies. These were pies that you started with the flour and the stuff. You put time into this, in the old pans that were handed down, And I can remember them talking about, they're not in the barn. They're not in the room. This wasn't your brother. Nobody could have walked past us. To walk out of the kitchen and have pies cooling on the big picnic table that we had in the kitchen to eat on, to go set the table and turn around, literally from the time you walk in the kitchen, from the kitchen to the dining room, put the plates on the table and turn around to get the silverware, and it's all gone.
Wow.
That's pretty crazy. And there was
Yeah.
stuff like that too. But, you kind of have that where, man, that poor guy was just probably, was he in there? Like, were people hiding him and he died? Was he wounded? All these unanswered questions. But just like you grabbed that shovel and were digging for that kid trying to find that answer, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah,
And
and
because I was
metaphorically, I've still got the shovel in my hand and I'm digging.
exactly. And I would do it instead of picking up a shovel, I picked up books.
Mhm.
I can remember, like I said, my mom and I left, and I was the youngest, and I went with her. And my other sisters, one went off to the Navy, and it was just everybody just went on their way. One of them got married. It would all just happen very fast. And I was. My mother and I moved around a lot, so I was like a new kid in school a lot. So my best friends were books. So I would go to the school library, and I would ask them, do you have any true ghost stories? I'll never forget this time. My mom takes me, and it's where they stay in the car and pull up out front. Go run in there, get your books, and come on back. I got stuff to do. Just hurry up. So I was in a hurry, and I'd never been in this big library, Newtown library. Just moved there. And I walked up to the librarian, typical librarian with the sweater over her shoulders and the glasses down her nose. And I said, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I don't have time to look it up. Can you just point to me where the true ghost stories are? And she looks at me and she pulls her glasses down. She says, there are no true ghost stories. I'll never forget it. And eventually she took me to a place where they had some stories, but it was all that, bump in the night kind of stuff for kids. And I'm like, no, do you have any on you didn't even have a name for it back then. The paranormal hadn't even,
Yeah, it's
parapsychology hasn't come out,
maybe supernatural or occult or
Yeah,
something. But I was the same
exactly.
way. I didn't want the fake stories or the literary
Right.
stuff. I wanted the real accounts. And I can remember when I discovered, like in third or fourth grade, people like Charles Fort or Frank Edwards, and it just blew my mind. Like, this is what I've been looking for. This is what I've wanted to read all my life. I
Yes.
didn't even know it existed, and here it is. And just absolutely devoured those books.
Yes. That's the word I was going to say. You took the word right out of my, you devoured. And you'd ask them, what's the limit? And they say, we can get out 10 books. I'm like, all 10. Because you don't know until you get in there if that's what you're looking for. And with me, mine was Hans Holzer, because I loved how he went in there. He would go, he would be very secretive about it to the mediums. He worked with Sybil Leek and Ethel Myers, and it was all trans medium stuff, which, if anybody's listening doesn't know what that is, that's a medium that goes into a trance, and basically the people that are around can speak to the spirit through her. So you're getting a little bit of communication. And he'd have that old push button recorder and his little notepad, and he would talk to the spirit. And I can remember one that I could, to this day, they were having a problem in the house. He got her in there. They're talking. And it turned out that it was I want to say, Civil War soldier that had been causing issues. And he was reliving his death. And he was hiding. Just see how this fits in. He was hiding, and a family had hit him. And they found him. The enemy side had found him in the kitchen. And they had beaten up the people that hit him, and then they basically, 6 soldiers had kicked him to death in the kitchen. And he couldn't understand what she was saying, because the guy was holding his mouth because they had kicked in his teeth. And when I read that, it zoomed me right back to the secret room in the staircase. And I remember taking that book and putting it outside my room when I went to sleep and shut the door. Did anybody ever do that? You couldn't,
Yeah, I used to put things under the couch in the living room,
you could, but I
so they
couldn't
wouldn't get
sleep.
me in my bedroom.
Yeah, I couldn't sleep with that book in my room because it touched home so much, because I thought, man, the other soldier it was in our farmhouse, maybe something like that happened to him. So it definitely gets ingrained in you, and just like you, these strange things. We say strange things and strange things in the woods, but they're really not as strange. It's almost normal, and we found different ways to poo-poo it or put it under the carpet and not look at it, but it's just around all the time,
Hmm.
you know, and there's been plenty. I mean, I've just so many. I mean, the one that touches me the most and hits me most home is my mom. And that's one of the ones I wanted to ask you guys about. Can I do that now, Zariah?
Yeah,
Ask you
absolutely.
your opinion? Okay. Um, okay. You know that my mom and I, went off by ourselves. So we were very tight. Single mom in the 60s, us against the world. And she found out that she had cancer. And a friend of hers in Florida, we were in New Jersey at the time, had said, come down here. So we packed up everything. She had been a cancer survivor, and she said, come to these doctors, this hospital, whatever, I'll help you through it. And that's where we were going. I didn't know that's why we were going, but we were going. I was about 11 at the time. And it didn't quite work out. Um, and we turned around to come back because all of our family was here. We made it as far as Virginia before she wound up in the hospital. And
Mm.
I remember, yeah, it was pretty hard. And she wasn't, she'd come out, she'd have some tests, she'd come out for a minute, a little bit, and we were trying to help. We were living on a farm at the time, helping another lady, friends of ours. And I stayed with them while she went back and forth to the hospital until it finally came to the point where she wasn't coming out. My aunt and uncle came and got me. And I was staying out here with them, and I was told I was going for a little vacation. I kind of knew better, but back then they lied to kids a lot. They didn't tell them
Right.
the truth. So it had been a little bit, it had been a couple weeks, and my aunt and uncle said, we're going to go on a trip back to Virginia and go see your mom. And I was like, fantastic, and my sister was going to be there from Detroit, and it was excellent. So we go in there and we had our visit, and it was a Catholic hospital, and they had a couple of nuns and a pastor come in and tell me that she wasn't probably going to make it, that it was getting into her brain, and that was going to be it. And so I very bravely, went through that, and we went up to see her, and we had a talk, and there was a couple people in the room, and her friend from Florida was there, and of course she had brought me this bag of oranges. And we visited, and my aunt and uncle, my sister were all going to take me to breakfast, and we gave our hugs, and we said we'll be back in a little bit. And we go to get in the elevator. Well, I instantly, as soon as the door started to shut, I instantly remembered I had forgot the oranges. So I stopped the door, and I said, I'll be right back. And I ran out of the elevator, past a couple of openings, rooms, to go to see my mom and grab the oranges up. And as I hit the doorway, you know how like you walk into a door and you're stopping yourself from running, so you grab the door, sides of the door.
Hmm.
I had one foot up ready to take a step into that room, and everything changed. I could see Sally with the bag of oranges talking to a lady, and I could see my mom at the bed, and there was a nun sitting next to her. My mom was sitting up, and they were the furthest away from the room by the window. My mom was sitting up, and the nun had her head down, and they both looked like they were praying. And as soon as I hit that door jam, my foot still in the air, it was like a vacuum. I don't know how else to explain it. That doesn't even come close, but it was similar. Everything slowed down, like the talking, everything just, whoa. You could hear the talking slow down. They still moved, but very slow. And I just kind of looked, and I focused in on my mom where she was sitting up, and all of a sudden this light starts coming from that area, actually from mom. And her head was still down, and she kind of lifted her head, and she turned, and she looked right at me, and she spoke to me, and she said, I have to go. I love you. You're going to be okay. Just always remember I love you. And the sound, I didn't realize it at the time, but it seemed like the sound was coming from inside my head instead of from her, but it was her voice.
Hmm.
And she's smiling. And then I remember thinking to myself, her mouth's not moving. And she just, her, as soon as I thought that, her eyes got a little bit brighter and her smile got brighter. And she said, "It's okay. I love you." And then she turned her head. And as soon as she put her head down, everything instantly sped back up again. It just like not it was slow starting, and then all of a sudden it went like somebody snapped your fingers, and my foot hit the ground, and I continued my walk, grabbed the oranges, and I was turned around, went back in the elevator before I even realized really what happened. I cannot explain that.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yes, I cannot explain that, and I've not found an answer for it since. The only thing I can get close to is things I've learned since. Um, Sometimes when you're that close to it, that was the last time I saw my mother alive.
Hmm.
And they say that sometimes when you're close to death, like say if you're so very sick and say like in a coma,
Right.
or if you're so, do you see what I mean? Or if you're so close to it that you're like half here, half there, you know?
Yeah.
But I have no explanation for that whatsoever. I mean, to have that, I just always looked at it growing up. I mean, I was 11. This wasn't a wishful thinking that wasn't anything like that. It might have been, you could say, trauma, you know, but it happened. And the way I know that it happened was I had no idea back then. I mean, yeah, you're reading books and you're trying to read up on it, but I had no knowledge of, how do you want to say it? Like, like say, like if you meet an alien, everything is telepathic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I didn't come across that till later. So if I was going to make something up in my mind, her mouth wasn't moving and I heard every word she was saying to me. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the only reason I held on to it and thought maybe it really did happen. And she just had some, I can't explain it.
It sounds to me like you entered an altered state as you came into the room.
Exactly.
And I mean, there are precedents too of people with near death experiences where their loved ones around them will experience some of what they're experienced just prior to their death or while they're experiencing the near death experience.
Yeah. Well, that's all possibilities are open, and the only other thing I can think of is now that you say that, and I have thought about it before, was I don't ever remember that nun talking to me for, I mean, there was, like I said, it was a Catholic hospital,
Mm.
and they're all, but I don't ever remember her talking to, maybe that's what it was. Maybe, like you said, altered states or whatever. But my mom has always been, you always say like your parents are your best teachers when you look back and you grow up and you go, wow, they were really smart. They knew a lot, but you have to get older to know that. Um, she's taught me the most about the paranormal because after, not only did I know that she had passed, I was going down the stairs and I heard the phone ring and I just stopped and I said, Mom's died. I knew it. You can call that intuition. You can call it, I don't know what you'd call it, but I knew.
Yeah.
And I went down the stairs into the kitchen and I turned around and my aunt, to get orange juice or something out of the refrigerator. When I closed the refrigerator door, my aunt was standing there and I looked at her and I said, it's okay. I know she died. She couldn't get it out. She was
Mm.
just standing there and had this look on her face. And she just hugged me. But I knew. And then she used to come and visit me while I was like, you'd wake up. All right, let me explain it this way. Here's one instance. I'm asleep. I'm on my side, and you know how you have your hand on your pillow, and you can kind of wake up for a minute, but you don't really realize where you are until you realize you're looking at your hand, and then you're awake. That kind of moment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my hand is on the pillow, and I notice there's a hand on mine, and I real slow follow it up as far as my eyes will go, and there's an arm, and it's my mom sitting on the side of the bed. But here's the kicker, as if that's not enough. She looks as she did when she died. Same, she was very sick. She had her hair the same way. They used to put it up in a little bun on her head. And she looked like she was still in pain, like she was still feeling that, like she was still that state. And of course, I just said, Mom. And as soon as I said, she's, boom, gone, disappeared. Like I startled her too. She looked at me. So, of course, naturally, if you think about it, if you do have a chance to stick around, you'd stick around to make sure your child is taken care of, or is she okay? I mean, we
Sure.
hear stories about that all the time. I've even heard that there's some kind of, you know, uh, precedents, like you said, where people sometimes stick around for the funeral or whatever. If this all is true anyway, you hear that. And there was a couple of times I wake up, but she'd be on the end of the bed, or she'd be sitting in the chair. And it wasn't every night. It was every so often, just when you weren't thinking about it anymore. Bam. And I used to get scared. I thought it was my fault. She would stick around and say something to me, because before she died, we had talks, every once in a while about, ghosts or things. And I said, "Oh, I wouldn't want you to come back, or I won't come back because I don't want to scare you." And I thought, because I had said that she wasn't sticking around because she was afraid she'd scare me. So I talked myself into all that kind of mess, like it's my fault she's not sticking around. But it didn't happen very often. It's maybe 5, 6 times, you know, and then it stopped. And then probably 6 years later, right the night before I went into basic training, I was at my sister's house, and, and I'm just laying there. I'm in bed. I slept on a pull-out couch in her living room for a couple of nights before I went into basic. I was going into Fort Dix. I was here in New Jersey. And she had a very distinctive back door. She had all the sea glass in this net that when you opened and closed the door, that sea glass net would bang onto the glass on the door and made a very distinctive sound. You always knew somebody was coming in the back door. And I heard that sound. And I sat up, and I thought it was one of my nieces coming in. And I sat up and I looked, and I'm like, "Man, you're getting in late, And nobody's there. And the door didn't move. And then all of a sudden you see a kind of like not really a light, but more like a sparkling, I guess you could say. And then the sparkling just got brighter. And there, all of a sudden, there's my mom. But she doesn't look sick anymore. This is 6, 7 years after she died.
Wow.
And she doesn't look sick anymore. And doggone it if she doesn't say something else to me without her mouth moving. There it is again, But she looked better. She looked like she did probably in her late 30s, 40s. She looked healthy. Her hair was fixed, her makeup, like she would when she was going to work or when she was going out, in the regular day clothes. But she looked like she wasn't sick anymore. And I remember distinctly, I can't remember every word she said. I wish I could say that, but that wouldn't be the truth. I can't remember every word, but distinctly I remember her telling me, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be all right now. You're not going to see me for a while." And I was like, "Well, what am I supposed to do? Am I doing the right thing?" "I can't tell you that. You have to do it on your own, but I love you." And then she was gone. So maybe they're not allowed to give us answers.
Maybe they don't know.
Maybe they don't know, or maybe it's just goes back to the free will thing,
Yeah.
But who knows, man? But that's how, how neat is that, that a mother's love, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's really cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
It is.
And I'm just glad she's better now, so that, when I said to Zariah, the things that they have taught me, it seems like before you cross, if you decide to stay, you're going to keep all that earthly stuff, your pains and your whatever, But after a while, after you cross, maybe we lose all that and we get, things get better. So at least that's a hopeful thing anyway, right?
Well, maybe we work it out of our system eventually.
Yeah, yeah, but that's a neat one, And I'd like to ask Steve. Can I ask Steve a question? Is that
Sure.
cool?
Go ahead.
Sure, go right ahead.
What's this? I've heard you ask this one time before, but the scariest thing that you saw, the one that really got under your skin, was it the thing in the ditch?
Well, that one, but I didn't actually see that one. I could only see where it was. The leaves were moving like something was kicking through the leaves, but I couldn't see anything. And to me, that was probably scarier than if I had seen something. And then there's another instance in my book where we saw like a man in a black robe with a horse head type thing. That was very, very frightening. But then, earlier we were talking about where you get that just primal fear that washes over you. I had an
Yep.
experience back in the early 2000s. I've only talked about it a couple of times just because the fear is still so real. I had an experience with black-eyed children in East Tennessee. A couple of girls one night, I was working late, getting out about 2 o'clock in the morning, and had gone to my car in the parking lot, and there were two girls in the parking lot off to one side, and there was typical black-eyed children type story. They had the hoodies; you couldn't really see the face until they moved up under the street light, and it was almost like a chant. He'll give us a ride. He has to give us a ride. He can't refuse us. He'll give us a ride. He has to give us a ride. And that one actually scared me so bad. I didn't talk about that for over 10 years.
I don't remember that one being in your book either.
That's not in my book. I've only recently decided to talk about it, just for fear of them coming back. I mean, that's how real the fear was. I mean, it was so real it was like unreal, because I was driving home after that happened, still in a panic. I'm going 100 miles an hour down this connector between freeways, Pillsippi Parkway, and I'm like literally looking behind me, and in the mirror and stuff, expecting to see them either on the back of my car. I had a little two-seater convertible, or in the mirror, following behind me. It was like an irrational fear, which I'd never ever experienced before to that degree, where it just didn't go away. And that, like I said, to this day, it's still kind of. I was hesitant to talk about it for fear of. There's some beliefs that if you talk about
Yep.
things, you actually give it power over you, and you can bring
Yep.
it back. And the first night that I talked about that, I was on Midnight in the Desert with Heather Wade, and about 4 o'clock in the morning, there was a scream, a girl's scream out my window, my bedroom window. Still have no idea what that was or what that was about, but I sat up. My first thought was they're back.
Hmm.
So kind of pressing my luck here talking about it again, but
Well,
at least I kind of know what to expect.
And if something
Yeah.
happens right after this, you need to let us know.
Yeah, but that's the three things: the thing in the ditch that I couldn't see, the horse head, whatever that was. I have no idea. It was. I sensed a real demonic presence from that, and then
Yeah.
the black-eyed girls, just because there wasn't anything scary about it. I mean, it was two girls, maybe 13, 14 years old. One was a little smaller than the other, but when I saw the face, and it was almost like no face, very white, very pale, and then with these big black eyes, and it just. I can't describe the fear
Yeah.
that washed over me, and still talking about it, I get like I'm kind of shaky now. Don't even like talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I totally understand. I'm right there with you. I've got them too. It's just, and it goes to a depth of just it's a knowing. When you're in presence of something you shouldn't be in the presence of.
Right.
And
Now,
you
another
need to
time
leave.
I had something that scared me very well. It was in the Bijou Theater in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's an old theater. It's way over 100 years old. It's purported to be haunted. Well, I was next door one night there's a restaurant connected to it called the Bistro at the Bijou. And I touch on this in my book. And I was at a friend's graduation party from law school. And there was another party there that night as well. And to get to the bathroom, you had to wade through this big crowd of people. I thought, well, I know where the bathrooms are in the Bijou. I'll just go over there. I went over there, and the odd part is the bathrooms are right there in the lobby, but for whatever reason, I didn't see them and decided I would go upstairs to the mezzanine where it was pitch black. I got about halfway up the stairs, and I felt just very light touch, like fingertips brushed down my arm in the dark. And I thought, no. And I actually went outside and went behind the building. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that
I-
was
yeah.
that was just a sudden thing, and I felt all the hair stand up, and that was just a short fright, though, not like the other ones that have stayed with me so long.
And lingers,
Yeah.
for years. Mine, you want to hear mine?
Sure.
Okay. This is the one that gets me. Well, I've got a few, but this one, when I heard you speak of the horse head, didn't you say that it morphed and changed?
Yeah, it's looked at first more like a horse, and then the eyes got really big. I mean, we're talking like the size of teacups, and then it kind of smiled, and the horse's teeth kind of turned into like sharp fang-like teeth. And I'm
Yep.
like 9, 10 years old, and this is just it's like something out of a cartoon or something. It's like
I know.
that's not supposed to happen. And I don't want anything to do with that. And the person that was with me, my friend Richard, he saw it too. His family lived way back in the woods, and their driveway was like a mile long. And we were about halfway down the driveway where there was a shale pit there and some old buildings and stuff up on the top of it. And he saw it too. So that's the one scariest thing that I actually had a witness with me when I saw it.
Right, right. And that's you can't, people say, I hear all these all the time, well, it was mass hallucination. Right. It's just like, no, no. When you have two people that saw it, and that's like mine too. And again, it was with my mom. It seemed to be a lot of things happen. I often wonder if I don't come from a family that had you also come from a family that had somewhat abilities and kind of welcomed.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
my grandmother
yes.
on my
See.
mother's side, she considered herself a gypsy witch. She
Hmm.
told fortunes. She would read tea leaves and coffee grounds, and she used
Yep.
playing cards. She wouldn't use tarot cards. She didn't like those. They held seances and table tappings and Ouija board, all kind of stuff. Now I was in the room when she died, and it
Hmm.
was kind of similar to what you described. Time didn't so much stop, but it was like all of a sudden all the air was sucked out of the room. It was like there was a
Yes.
vacuum. And earlier off the air, we were talking about how being in the woods sometimes and it gets so quiet you can't hear a sound.
Yep.
It was like that in her hospital room. I mean, nothing.
Yep.
I could not hear. It was like I was suddenly struck deaf. And it's like my senses were heightened. And the room got
Yes.
brighter. And then I physically felt her spirit leave her body. I didn't see it, but I felt it. And then it was like everything came back. Then I could hear people out in the hallway. The lights dimmed
Yes.
back to where they were and things, and she was gone. But that was
Well,
the first time
maybe
I'd ever
that's
been in
it.
the room with somebody when they died.
Maybe that's it, Steve. Maybe it's something like, maybe that's what it feels like when, for lack of a better term, the veil thins,
Hmm.
you know, and the two worlds mesh kind of, because there's an awful lot of things like that where I've walked into situations and you can feel that kind of vacuum where it all just
Uh-huh.
stops like that.
And that's
And
why it puts me off when I feel that in the woods, because I'm thinking,
yes.
that's what I equate it with is the death of my grandmother. And I'm thinking, okay,
Hmm.
I'm somewhere where I don't need to be. Maybe I'm a little too close to passing through the veil,
Exactly.
so I can get back on the
Exactly.
trail and go the other direction.
Or like they say, like often when we hear David, I mean, we've all listened to his stories,
Uh-huh.
and I often think, Portal or something like that, because it's just, I mean, his is a little bit more specific. It's almost like the Portal is picking specific ones. I mean, come
Yeah.
on, in Descent, and
But yeah,
aren't
the
you?
bright clothing and all the weird
Yeah.
things like that. That's all
Different.
the coincidences, or there's too much there to be coincidence,
Yeah,
really.
and the stuff in the bars, and the stuff in the bars.
Uh,
My son had an experience like that, and I often think, and it was very recently, and I often think that, I made him listen to a little bit of it, and he couldn't even listen to it anymore. He goes, "Mom, I think I came close. I think I
wow.
came close." His
Well,
brother found him. He has no idea how he got there. He had no business being there. He found him leaning up against a building of a quick check. He has no idea how he got there. He was miles away from the bar he was at. He doesn't follow too many of the specifics, like the college kids and stuff that go missing, but his experience seemed to be,
yeah.
a lot of the same. Like maybe he just skated around it or came close, I think he had a little help that day too, because my sons, they were with me in Gettysburg, but I don't bring them when I go try to help people or anything like that. I keep them out of it, because I learned that when you're in your 20s, you're just really starting to kind of get a taste of this, and you got to go at it the right way. You either go at it with an education and a knowledge, or stay away from it, shut it down. I mean, it's just one of the two. And my one son had just a feeling, and went to go look for him. We're at Jersey Shore, and he was in Atlantic City, and my son went to look for him and took the wrong turn, and went to go turn around at this gas station quick check, and looks over and sees somebody leaning against the building, and it was his brother.
Wow.
And they were nowhere near an exit that he should have been gone. He took a wrong turn. or a right or a right one,
Yeah.
you know. And when you ask, and my oldest one was the one that found him, and he's 29 now, and he was 25. This is only 2 years ago, and he won't talk about it. I'm like, well, what made you take the turn? Did you hear something? Did you, you know? But he won't talk much about Gettysburg either. He'll just like, man, that was crazy. I saw it, and I can't explain it. He gets shaky.
Yeah, I've been there, and there's no way to describe what, if you have any type of empathic ability, you feel it
Yep.
there more so than anywhere I've ever been. It's just, and it's a constant barrage too.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You got to prepare way ahead of time,
Yeah.
to for what you're gonna go through. Just walking through and doing nothing. It's you get this heaviness. I've had a lot of gone to the dentist a lot lately. I'm just getting some work done, but I'll
Mhm.
tell you what brings you back is when they throw that weighted vest on you before they take your X-rays.
Mm.
Uh-huh.
They throw it down on your chest, and you just get that thunk.
Very similar feeling. And
Yep.
what would always get me is like you see other people and you know they're experiencing what you are, but they don't know what it is. I've seen people at Gettysburg and another location get that deer in the headlights look, like,
Yep.
I don't feel so well. I need to go lay down. I think I'm about to have a stroke or something. I've heard people say
Yes.
things like that, and they don't realize it's all this energy or whatever is trapped there that's having this effect on them.
Absolutely. And who's to say? I mean, there's places now I can't go. I mean, you're Native American, I'm Native American. I don't know if Zariah knows that. We both have a Native American background.
Mm.
And we had talked a little bit, and said that. And it's just, if you, I don't know if you practice it, but you're very well aware, getting your stories and hearing, different things. And, uh, we just have a different way of looking at it. You're kind of brought up with a different respect of it. Like
You have a
after-
reverence for things. Yeah,
Exactly.
like when I'm near an Indian mound or something like that, I know not to walk on it. I know not to disturb
Yep.
it. And in one of my books, I talk about a giant tree in the woods that somebody told me about down near Loudon, Tennessee. And I've actually been there and visited the tree, and it's somebody's power spot, and it's just behind an Indian mound where I forget how many are interred there, but just behind there's this huge tree that doesn't even look real. I mean, it's hyper real. It looks like a Disney tree. It's so real, it's unreal. And you
Yes.
can just feel the energy. And when I go there, I get that feeling, like, this isn't for you. Yeah, you've got some blood here, but this is something else. Go that way, go the other way. And I
Yep.
can only stay there just a short amount of time. It feels like you've walked into somebody's house, and then you've got to get out before they come out of the kitchen back into the living room and catch you there. It's like you're intruding on somebody's power spot. And
Yep,
I
back
sense
up
that
and
there's
get
a
out.
lot of places. I mean, sometimes even in the woods, I felt that, like, just out in the middle of nowhere, like, I don't need to be here for whatever reason. I don't question it. I just go. If I get that sensation, I know not to question, just to go.
And if and I spent just as long in Alabama. I raised my boys there before I brought them back to New Jersey to give them a good foundation. It's like the city was bad when I was here. I didn't want to raise two boys alone because I raised them myself. So I kept them out there, and I took them out of the woods a lot. And we knew a lot of. I was very active in the Native American community, so we'd go to powwows, and those are usually 2, maybe 3 days to the public, but they're about 5 days to us. We stay overnight
Yeah,
and stuff.
I've
So I
been to
used to.
some powwows. Those
Oh
are
gosh,
a lot
yeah.
of fun.
That's when all the fun happens. When everybody else goes home and you sit around the fire, you talk to all
Yeah.
the elders, you get all the real good stuff going on.
Oh
Yeah, that
they've
was
got
awesome.
some amazing stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. But we'd go out in the woods, just sit there, and there's time where you're just so calm and you're just one with nature. And just like you said, there's a place you walk on, and you're following an elder, and they go, no, not that way, and you don't ask.
And that
You
the
know?
Smokies are like that. There are places that the Cherokee know to avoid. It's been passed down for generations. There's just places they will not go. The Superstition Mountains in Arizona are like that. And it's been, strange disappearances, beheadings, murders, suicides, all this. Certain bands of Indians won't go anywhere near the mountains at all. Other tribes will go to certain areas and avoid certain others. There's something there. And then there's also another thing I've encountered where it's just the polar opposite of that. And I've had this happen in the Smokies. I've wandered off the trail, and I found just the most peaceful spot. And I was just overcome with this feeling that I just needed to sit down or maybe even lay down and just take a nap. And
Mm.
I fought that. I had to fight that off of me. And that makes me wonder
Wow.
about like the missing 411 thing. If I'd laid down and gone to sleep, am I going to be like Rip Van Winkle or something? Am I going to wake up 20 years later with a long beard? Are they going to find me there,
Right.
bones with my shoes and socks off and my underwear turned inside out? But it was just almost like the forest was lulling me, like, no, this is safe here. Yeah, lay down right here. You're
Yeah, lay
tired. You
down.
need to rest. This would be
Exactly.
good for you. Sit down at the tree. Go ahead, lay down, take a nap. You'll be all right. And just once
Yep.
that spell kind of broke, it was just like, I'm sweating now. I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't want to lay down in the woods off
Right.
the trail. And it was just such an aberrant thought because I've been in the woods a lot. I've done rough camping and winter camping things, and I know you
Yep.
just don't do things like that. And for suddenly to be overcome with a desire to want to do that, to almost listen to this wherever it's coming from, and that
Yeah.
may be kind of a missing 411 type thing.
I
Knowing
agree.
what to listen to and when to listen to it can be a big difference too.
I think you used a good word there. Where you said a lulling, and
Uh-huh.
I've had that. I've had that too. Where you get in there and you're just like, I could just stay here
I
forever.
could
I
just
think
stay
I'm
here
just gonna.
forever, and I think
Yep.
that's exactly what would have happened. I'd
Yep.
still be there, be
Yep.
like Dennis Martin or one of these other kids do.
Hmm.
That was
Exactly.
the linchpin case for me. I was just
Yep.
about not quite a year younger than Dennis when he disappeared. We lived in the same town. We were both in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I saw that on the news, daily. And I even, I'm a kid. I'm like 6. I went out and rode my bicycle up and down the street, thinking I might see him, like not thinking that, I'm an hour from the Smokies. But that one, more than anything, kind of opened my eyes
Touched
up.
home.
Yeah, it's like sometimes bad things happen to kids and they don't come back.
Exactly.
So
The
I've
realization of
always kept
life.
that
Yeah.
case in mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this weird thing, I met his father before, and his dad died on my birthday like 2 years ago. So that was kind of strange. And that was just the whole family, the wife and the father were just broken by that. Just, can you imagine 40, I guess
No.
47 years or so now with no closure and thinking that one day, a grown
No.
man is going to walk up on the porch and say, "Hi, I'm Dennis. I got lost in the woods and I've been, wherever for the last 40 something years," but
No. It's
it never happened.
unconscionable.
Yeah.
As a mother of two sons that I tried to raise, like I said, that they'll tell you right now, we were raised Army Native American by a redhead. We didn't have a chance. They'll both tell you that they still put their hands in their pockets before they go into a store. They're almost 30. I'm like, gosh, was I that tough? You know, but they I would tell them like,
It's the
don't.
admonishment, don't touch anything. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 but it must have took, and I'm
Uh,
glad that some stuff took. They're both, decent, terrific human beings. So, that's an accomplishment right there. But, I would constantly tell them it's like they were with me in the woods and they were younger than when I first took them to Montesano. And I was like, I kept grabbing them by the back of the jacket. It's like, no, don't go that way. Don't just stay. We got to get out of here. Oh, Ma, and we're
mm,
with a couple other people. And I'm like, I can't explain it, but we have to get out of here like now, and you're putting the whole kibosh on the whole day, but you're like, I can't explain. I mean, I was shaken,
I've had
it
that
took it
happen. I went on a
inside.
camping trip once and got there, and before I even got my gear completely unpacked, I'm just like, this isn't right. And I put everything back in my truck and drove home all the way
Hmm.
home, and just like, I don't know what might have happened, or I didn't, really have an idea, but I just knew that this wasn't the weekend to go camping, and I just packed it up and left.
But you listen and see, I tell people that all the time. I
Yeah,
know
you
Zariah.
get that gut feeling
Yep.
often
Yep.
enough and strong enough, when to listen to it.
Yep. It's animal instincts. The animals don't talk themselves out of it, but I believe that we do. And I know I've heard Zariah speak about this before too, that I may have this wrong, Soraya. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you had said in another interview too that you believe that everybody is born with an inherent ability,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
a bit of intuition, and it's almost like I tell people it's almost like push-ups. Like first couple days you're doing them, you can do three. you know, but if you keep doing them, you do more and more. And the more you exercise it, the more your ability,
Right.
can
And
get
when you're
exercised.
young, you're too
Yeah.
young to know unless somebody's telling you, no, this doesn't exist, or you can't see that, or I
Yes,
think that's why kids have so many more paranormal experiences, because
I
they're
do too.
open to it and they haven't been trained, they haven't learned not to trust that instinct. Whereas
Yeah.
I was encouraged by my grandmother to listen to that. I talked to
Yep.
her about the kid that I saw some years later, and she said that was meant for you to
Hmm.
see, just to know that sometimes you're going to see things that don't make any sense, and sometimes you're going to see things that aren't really there that nobody else can see, but that's meant for you because for
Right.
whatever reason, so that's kind of how I've lived by that.
Yeah. And two, how grateful I am that I had a parent, at least one parent, that when I said there was something going on, they didn't send me back to my room and tell me I was
Yeah.
because my mom wasn't big on, she wouldn't poo-poo anything,
Yeah.
if I said there was something and there wasn't anything in my closet, just to state,
Yeah.
but
And that
if
was
I
the
said
way
there was
my
something in
mom
my
was.
closet, she wouldn't send me back. She would, like, come in with me, we'll talk
Yeah.
about it. But
Yeah.
I had people that would show up, and to this day, I don't know if it was kids that were ghosts, if it was my imagination, if it was something else. But I would talk with them. I had a little girl that I used to talk to in this one house. Never saw her again when we moved, and she had red hair, pigtails, overhauls, which was weird for the Jersey Shore. It wasn't like we were on a farm,
Mhm.
and that little, like, red and white, I think they call it gingham check shirt,
Mhm.
and there was something wrong with the collar. I can't remember if it was half of her collar was missing or if it was just torn. I can't remember. But I used to see her all the time. And then we moved. I never saw her again because I can remember saying, is Katie coming with us? And she's like, no, Katie has to stay, you know. So stuff like that was just, it was normal. You
Well,
just,
I used to do that when I was a kid. I had other kids that I would talk about, and then later on in life, my parents asked me, like, "Who were those kids you used to imagine?" I'm like, "I didn't imagine them. I would play with them
nope.
out in the yard." And they're like, "No, you didn't. There were no kids around." But I remember distinctly playing with two little boys. I know
Hmm.
their names and everything. I'm not won't go into that right now, but it was, I mean, they were as real as I am to myself,
Yes.
and yet they didn't correct me on it. They just thought I was, had an imaginary friend or whatever, but
Yes.
it wasn't imaginary. And I had no idea until later that they didn't know, because my mom would call me in and the other two little boys, okay, we got to go now. We'll see you tomorrow. And they go off into the woods. And, I didn't think that was
Yep.
strange. And then as an adult, who are those? You used to talk about your imaginary friends, and they named them. And I'm like, no, those were kids that lived on the other side of the hill. And they're like, no, the other side of the hill, there's a lake there. There's nobody that lives over there. So who
I
knows? But
know.
that struck me as odd
The
that I may have
realization that
entertained ghosts for years and
yes,
didn't know anything about it. And I've had
exactly.
that feeling walking down the street before. You see somebody that's very out of place or maybe dressed very oddly or something, and you wonder, is anybody else seeing this person, or am I the only one noticing this? I've had that
Yes.
experience here in Portland downtown. I saw a man wearing period clothing from like the 1800s
Hmm.
walking downtown, and I'm thinking, and nobody's paying any attention. Nobody's like, look at that guy's get up, or what's he part of? Is he an actor or something?
Yes.
People just walking right by. Of course, we live in a time where you're kind of taught to ignore things and not to stare and point at people. And I even turned around and went back and couldn't find the guy, which made it even more strange. Of course, he could have walked in any of a number of buildings, but it
Yep.
makes you wonder, did I pass a ghost? Did I see one on the street that only I saw and nobody else saw it? Just
Yep.
curious as if I tried to take a photograph, what would have happened?
Hmm. Yeah, really.
I know, and it's really weird. And like you said, it there's something about the woods in the South. I think it's just because there are so many places out there. You don't want to say untouched, but let's say
Hmm.
left alone. You know,
Yeah.
and you've got all those places and the strange things you see out there. I mean, my son tapped me on the shoulder one day when I was driving. He goes, "Did you see that?" I'm like, see, what? I saw a big brown ball. He saw Bigfoot
Hmm.
we were in Tony, Alabama. I want to say Bigfoot, maybe not, because it didn't seem as large. And when I passed it, because you're cornfields, okay. If anybody's ever driven down a country road where you've got cornfields on both sides of you,
It's
you
almost
know,
hypnotic. Hmm.
it is, and you just saw this big blur, but I could have sworn and I saw something, and I can say if a gorilla was standing up on its hind legs, not a big dark gorilla, but one of me, a smaller one, and upright, but with a great big huge lip. I don't like almost like a gorilla pouting a lot, like a big lip. And I'm like, I didn't see that. But when he turned to me and said, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, "You didn't see. Tell me you didn't see that, because I don't want to see that. And
Yeah,
and you
I've
go
had
back,
experiences like that where I was
yeah,
in Las Vegas once. I worked at and now it's Bally's. It was part of it was the old MGM that burned back in the '80s, and we worked. I was the manager of a photo lab for the in-house photography, the souvenir stuff, and the part of the building we were in was the part of the tower that remained after the fire and had been retrofitted. And we were in the lab one night, and I had two runners under my employ that helped the photographers pack their albums and try to sell them to people after the show broke out. Well, I'm sitting there and I see a shapeless black man, almost like a round ball, nothing, and just so black that it's like beyond black. It's like black, like deep space black, and it just kind of meanders across the room and goes through the wall. I'm thinking, okay, but I'm not going to say anything. And suddenly, these two teenage kids I've got working there for me, they're like, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, "What did you see?" And they're like, "This black thing just crossed the room and went into the wall." And they left. They went across the street to Caesars, where their cousin worked, and would not come back. I had to call the main office and get two other guys sent out that night. And just things like that, it makes you wonder. But
yeah.
I've found out from other people that worked there that they had a lot of experiences too. And there was, I think, 80-something people that died in that fire. So no wonder.
Oh, bless them. Yeah. And it's probably stuck, because I've learned that, if it happens so fast, sometimes they don't even realize it. I've
Yeah, well, when it
got
flashed
friends.
over and went through
Yeah.
the casino lobby, there were people that like burned to death at the blackjack tables and at the slot machines and things that had no idea what hit them. So
What hit
I think
them?
when you have that sudden tragic loss of life like that, it tends to leave more of an energy imprint or a residual or something there.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
anything violent or sudden where the person doesn't realize they're dead, it seems to increase the level of haunting in my experience.
Yes, and like you say, in my experience, I've had the same realization and studying it. Like I said, not an expert in any. I don't think you can be an expert in this field. You can do it all your
I
life.
don't think yeah, you could.
There's
It
such a
never even
thing. I
scratched
don't
the
think there's
surface.
such a thing. Nope, and not even scratch it. And but even in one instance, like like say a car wreck where there's multiple people all at the same time, or a plane crash or something. I have a friend who I got involved with talking with her. She lives in another state, and she does spirit rescue as well. And she didn't start out to do that. And I got involved with her because I had saw her on one of these shows. I guess it was Ghostly Encounters or something like that. And she so touched me because she had such a heart about it. And she was just going out with her husband to try to get some EVPs. They were trying to have some, they'd retired and they were trying to get, they're both interested. So they were going to go out and do stuff. And there was a plane crash in a cornfield not far from where they were. And they were going out there basically to do something else. And her thing that she liked to use, she didn't like to use electronics. She used dowsing rods.
Mhm.
And to communicate. And he used EMF meters and a recorder and some other stuff and photography, I believe, maybe a video camera. I can't remember. And it touched me because she had gone out there several times, got communication, got EVPs of this plane crash. And I believe it was in the late 50s, around 57 maybe. And she was communicating over just several times with these people that were still stuck in that cornfield. She said 5 different people,
Wow.
2 of which did not even realize they had died. 3 of them knew they were dead, but didn't know what to do about it, she said, which I thought was kind of funny
Mhm.
and sad at the same time. And so she had taken upon herself that she was going to go out there and communicate and kind of be, for lack of a better term, a ghost whisperer, and coax them through very slowly. And she said The three of them took to it very quickly, and the other two she had to work on a little bit. And at the very end of it, the same thing happened to her that happened to me. When the last guy said, "Yes, I'll trust you, and I'll go into this light," whatever it was, the conversation. Right before he left, she got a hug with the dowsing rods. They came up and hugged her, which connected to me because that's the same thing that happened to me in Gettysburg. So we started talking, a little bit. I found her, messaged her, and we started adding some of the things she had been through and some of the things I've been through. And I'm like, that's it, man. That's exactly what I've been doing. And that's what's happened to me. That's what I found out, that you could have the same exact, everybody go pretty much at the same time. And obviously, out of, dozens of people that were on this plane that went, she found five still left from 1957 that had been wandering around there and had no idea, or like I said, 3 out of 5. That's amazing.
Yeah. I heard of a
And
case
you
like
wonder,
that in the South where there was a train wreck, and
uh-huh,
a medium like that found it was like a dozen people that didn't know they were dead, that were just wandering this area near the railroad tracks where they had died decades ago
hmm,
during this horrific train crash. And just, you think about things like that, that maybe, that there are spots like that where there are just loads of people waiting to be
has to
sent
be
over, and they're just passing the time until they figure out what to do, or till
right.
somebody comes along and helps them.
And you have so many different levels if you start thinking about this and studying it as long as the three of us have really. Um, you've got all these different levels. You've got your residual, you've got your playback. Has it had have either one of you guys, this is one of the ones that blows my mind, because as soon as you think, it's like this great big paranormal onion, I call it. The more layers you start peeling, there's another layer, and there's another layer, and there's another layer. And I'm worried that we're going to get to the middle and find out, okay, nothing, because we're out of layers or the answer, you know.
Mhm.
And there was a case. It was Gettysburg, and I think it was Gettysburg College. And I got a chance to sit down and talk to Mark. Does anybody know Mark Nesbitt? He's written several books out there for Gettysburg, and if you haven't, they're really good books to check out. But he lives out there, and I think he probably does ghost tours and stuff now too. But in one of his books, and then somebody else's that I read about, there's a case of the elevator, and it touched on me because I like the ones where they don't really want to give their name, or they give their name but they really don't want any publicity. You can kind of tell that, okay, we got something here. And there was three, and one guy doesn't want to talk about it at all, you know. So you kind of like, we got something. They go in the elevator. They worked in the college, believe, up on like the third floor or something, and they push just like they did every day the elevator button to go up, and the elevator goes down, and they start, okay, what's going on, and keeps going down. Okay, we got a problem. We pushing buttons. Well, it goes all the way down to the basement, and they're talking amongst themselves like, well, I don't know what's going on. This is strange. And when the doors open, they said, one of the ladies in the conversation said that she felt really funny, like, I don't like this at all. She was already picking up on it before the
Mhm.
doors ever opened. The doors open, and there is a scene right out of a Civil War battlefield, surgical. So there's wounded everywhere. There's people going back and forth with bandages and carrying, a guy from here to there. I mean, it's a whole Civil War battle scene, more like a hospital surgical room section, something like that. And the problem was, you'd think it was residual or just a replay or a loop of some
Uh-huh.
kind. But the ladies are looking up at this one surgeon, and he's right in the middle of an amputation or something like that, and they're screaming and yelling and all the sounds. It must have been horrific. And the surgeon looks up and looks right at them, and again, not moving the mouth, she hears, help me.
Wow.
So to me, you've got residual, got a loop, and then you have intelligent, all in the same shot. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, because there's an active situation there, and then where something in the scene is acknowledging the women. It makes you wonder: did the guy, when he was on actually operating on the people, did he have a vision of somebody stepping into the room? Maybe he thought they were angels or something that had come to visit. When they stepped off the
Right.
elevator, makes you wonder. Back in that time period when this happened, did he see those people then as well? It
Wow.
boggles the mind to think of the possibilities there.
Yeah, that's a different take on that. I didn't think about that. What was he? Yeah, did he see them at the time? Wow. See? There goes that onion again.
Yeah, another layer. And I don't think there is a middle or an end to it. There's too many layers. I don't think
There is.
it's like a Tootsie Pop. You'll never get to the center of it.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, what's your take on that, Zariah?
I'm not actually sure, to be honest with you.
Isn't that wild?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, well, that was one that I had read a couple of years ago, and like I said, couple different accounts and two different separate authors' books. And when I got a chance to go to Gettysburg that night, I had heard that Mark Nesbitt was over there signing books in his little shop, and I just stood there and listened to him for a while, and I kind of kept, just standing back. And he had a little line, a couple of people there, and it's just a little bitty shop with, I think his daughter works the counter, and it was Halloween night in Gettysburg. Shoot, it was busy. And I'm standing off the corner. He keeps looking at me, and my boys are looking at books and stuff, and I'm just standing there, and he must have felt like somebody's looking at me, and he must have got uncomfortable. And he just looks up at me, stops talking, and he didn't even say hello or anything. He goes, "Are you a sensitive?" And I kind of laughed. And I went, "Yeah, kind of." And he said, "I thought so." And he just goes back to writing his book. And when it got to be, it got emptied out a little bit, I walked up and talked to him, shook his hand, and introduced myself and stuff to him. And I'm like, "Man, I'm nobody. I just, I've read your books, and, we're here, blah, blah, blah." And I got a chance to talk to him. He goes, "Are you going on any tours? How long are you going to be here?" And I'm like, "A night and 2 days. That's it. I'm whizzing in and whizzing out." And I said, "Man, but I got to ask you about that elevator thing." And he just sat up and sat back in his chair and looked at me. He goes, "You know about the elevator?" I said, "Yeah, the story." And he goes, "That one gets me every time." And I'm like, "Yeah. Yeah." I mean, he's got no explanation either. And he's in there like every day, and he goes, "I went back to talk to those ladies and said the other one won't talk about it anymore." And, they get so scared. I mean, it must have been such an impactful thing. But and of course, that's the night I found out that cellar was used, of course, for wounded, and there was a thing there, so it could have been a loop or mix. Who knows?
Yeah, and the Civil War has so many places like that. The
Yeah.
Martha Washington Inn in Abingdon, Virginia. I've stayed there. It's very actively haunted. And
Mhm.
same thing, it was used as a field hospital during the Civil War.
Yep.
And Fort Oglethorpe in Georgia, very, very bloody battle there. To this day, they hear cannon fire and gunfire and people talking in the woods when there's no enactors or anything around.
Mhm.
There's a story in one of my books about a guy that saw somebody dressed like a soldier walking through the fog there about 3 o'clock in the morning, and when nobody was around or even supposed to be in the park. But
Mhm.
more than any other conflict or battle, or the Civil War left such an impression everywhere. I mean,
Mhm.
there's Revolutionary War places where there's still some hauntings and things, and of course, look at World War I or World War II in Europe, and some of
Gosh.
those.
Yeah.
There's a war, but there's something about the Civil War that seems to have
Yes.
made all those hauntings more prevalent and more active and more something.
Mhm.
I don't know what it is about that. Maybe I don't know. I don't even want to hazard a guess. I don't really know
Yeah.
how you would
Yeah.
account for that. Why that
I
particular?
I don't know. I don't
Unless
know.
it was, it was us fighting ourselves essentially. In a lot of cases, brother against brother and things. Even so,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
very
know.
the emotional depth of it. I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, who
And
can?
East Tennessee was like that too. There's, you had your big battles, but then you had a lot of little skirmishes that nobody ever
Skirmishes.
knows about. When I was in the kid playing in the woods, we would find the mini balls, or we found a cannonball one time. We had a rope swing set up in the woods and thought we hit a rock or something. It was an actual cannonball, a small one.
Mm-hmm.
And there where I grew up, the road where the ditch was that I saw the thing come out of, I eventually found out that that was the road through the area around the Revolutionary War time. And then down just below that, there was an area where 7 springs met together on our property and fed into the lake. And we used to find the Civil War mini balls and stuff there too. And we were burning an old tree that had fallen down one time and found about half of a Civil War bayonet that was broken off in the tree. So there had been some kind of battle or something there around that water. And that, as a child, that place always scared me. Like, we had a little bridge, and when you crossed the bridge, you're in the little bottom there, and you had these 7 springs that came out of the rocks and from underneath the ground there and ran down into the lake. And if I was playing down there and it got dark and I suddenly realized, hey, it's getting dark, I would get that fear, that panic, like, I need to get out of here. And I would run.
Now.
But as soon as I crossed the bridge, it was gone. It was like whatever was chasing me stopped. And I read something years later, and I think it was in a Hans Holzer book, like you're mentioning. He talked about how supposedly ghosts could not cross running water. And I'm like,
yes.
Well, there you go, because as soon as I got across the bridge, I was fine. I didn't feel like something was after me anymore.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that too. I mean, I've not just heard ghosts, but I've heard a lot of other things too. Or they're set to a certain place. Like, just seems to be that there's a certain set of rules.
Yeah, like they're on, like a tether.
Water.
They can go 300 yards and no further. You can go in a circle 300 yards any direction, but beyond that you can't bother anybody, you can't be seen, you can't touch anybody. Yeah, that stands to reason. Although I have known people that had ghosts or some type of spirit follow them home and things like that.
Yes.
So not all of them are bound to those same rules. So
now I
layer.
had this old media, I want to say the old goat woman on the hill that everybody doesn't listen to till they need the advice, But I had a lady explain that to me. It made sense that she just looked at me and smiled and said, well, when they leave, they're riding on you.
Mm-hmm.
You're carrying them out. Now, doesn't that send a shiver up your spine?
Yeah. There's a place in Tennessee where they used to tell that somebody had drowned somebody in a pond or something there, and supposedly if you rode by the pond, there were 3 ponds, and at the first pond, if you rode by on a horse, you would feel somebody get on the horse behind you, and they would stay on until the last pond, which you actually had to cross a little bridge to get across, and then they would be gone. And I've heard an updated version of that now you can feel like if you're on a bicycle or a motorcycle, it feels like somebody's holding on behind you. And I haven't been there to test that one out, but
I'm not testing that one out. That's just, man, there's certain things like the thing you can make yourself crazy just looking in the rearview mirror. Yeah. One day you're going to look in the rearview mirror, somebody's going to be sitting there.
And there is going to be something there. Yeah, I didn't want to. I've thought about that before. Like,
I'm sorry.
Down the street at 100 miles an hour, and I look back, and the black-eyed kids are hanging onto my luggage rack. Then what am I going to do?
I don't know. There's got to be rules somewhere. Where's this rule book at? I want to know what we can use. That's so funny. Because the woods get me. Oh man, the Dismal Swamp. Have you ever heard of the Dismal Swamp in Virginia?
Yeah.
Oh, please. They named that right. I'm sorry to anybody that lives out there, but they're going to agree with me if you live out there. I lived there for a brief time in the 70s. This was right before my mom went in the hospital and stayed, so we were in Virginia. And we lived in Deep Creek, Virginia. And to get to Great Bridge, which is the only grocery store or civilization of any kind back then, you had to go down this one road. Now, this is where probably one of my top 3 scariest ones ever happened. And the Dismal Swamp is on both sides of this road. Now, this is one of those long country roads that seem to never end. And 2 cars have a hard time passing each other on this road. Now, it's probably changed now. But there was no guardrail. There's no curb. I mean, when the road ended, and it was swamp on both sides. So my job, this was when seatbelts were optional, was to sit up and lean kind of over the dashboard to watch the tires and tell Mom, you're too close. Because I was scared to death of quicksand. I don't know what they did to us as kids.
Yeah, it was all those movies and TV. You'd see that quicksand on television, a rifleman or something. Like, oh my God, there's such a thing as that. No, I'm afraid to go out in the yard.
Terrified. I was terrified of
That was
quicksand.
one of my biggest fears as a
I
child was
know.
quicksand, and I'd kind of
Yes.
forgotten about it until you mentioned it. So, sorry, I interrupted your story, but I had to say something about the quicksand.
Quicksand scares the heck out of me to this day, man. No, I can't stand. It got everybody. Got Frankenstein. Got
Yeah,
everybody.
I was watching Daniel Boone, and like
Yep.
Mingo got in the quicksand, and if Daniel had come in and
Exactly.
pushed him out, he would have died.
It was over. Yep. Yep. But we were that car wasn't going in. She had a 74. I'm a little bit of a motorhead, Mustang when cars were cars, man. And 1974. Now, if you know anything about cars, that was the year that they had those lever back windows. I don't know who thought of that. It looked cool from the outside, but when you were in the inside and needed to see out the back
Couldn't
window, it
see
was a
anything.
bad idea.
Yeah.
Is a bad idea, right? So we're in there, and the canopy of the trees would come together. So even in the daytime, it could be kind of dark. It's scary and depressing. And it was a 14-mile, road. So we're on this road, and we're going. We're already tense. My mom's 10 and 2, white knuckling the whole time. And she did, like I said, she wasn't scared of nothing. But who wants to put their car in the swamp?
Mm-hmm.
And we're riding along, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, because there was lots of grasses and stuff, you see this big black thing come in front of, and it didn't jut out. It didn't do like a deer and kind of jump out. It just kind of walked right in front of the car. And it's, at the time we first saw it, I'm going to say 4 or 5 car lengths, and we're not barreling. We probably 35, 40 miles an hour. And she didn't slam the brakes. She kind of, and then that mom hand came out to brace you, like they throw the arm.
Seat, yeah.
Right. Well, see, I was leaning forward watching the tires. So she at first grabbed for me, but she kind of missed my shoulder to pull me back and scratched me a little bit, and then shoved me, because I think she knew we were going to hit, And I still had one hand on the dashboard leaning forward because I wanted to see what this thing was. Now, we were living on a farm, and I'd lived on a farm before. I know what a hog looks like. I know how big they can be. And it was like a big hog. I thought it was a bear. First thought. I thought it was a bear. But as you got a little bit closer, and she's trying to pop the brakes, but the car's still not slowing down fast enough. And it looked like, a boar or hog, it's straight across its back. Its legs are about the same height. This one had taller legs in the back, so it was going down at an angle. So it looked kind of like a bear was crawling. And a big head. So as the car got closer to it, and we weren't going to be able to stop in time, I'm looking right at this thing. And right before we hit it, it turned and looked at us. And that's when I got my face. And the face, at first it looked like a pig, an ugly, ugly, horrible pig. And then the face changed again, just real fast. I mean, I can't even say that it stopped for a second and stayed one thing. And we're coming at it, so it's all very fast. And by God, if it didn't have red eyes, I've been plagued with red eyes. Well, now you could say, reflection off the headlights, you could say any of that. It was daytime, but we had the headlights running because, like I said, the canopy over top. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Could have
dark
been
in there in the daytime. That whole area is strange. I've been from Manteo and then up through Albemarle Sound, all the way to Elizabeth City, and that's just south of the Great Dismal Swamp, and then went up into Virginia toward Chesapeake, and I heard all kinds of stories about. There was, I think during the Civil War, wasn't there a unit that got lost in the swamp or something?
Dismal
was never
Swamp,
found. Yeah.
Yep, all that stuff. But see, the thing about it, man, is the car didn't stop. We hit it. Okay? I mean, we hit that thing, and you brace yourself. You know you're going to hit something. So you brace yourself, because I put both my hands on the thing, and I still have my mom's hand in front of me, but I had my hand on that big black dashboard, and I'm ready to hit this. I saw the face, I saw it change, and I can't even describe it to you. It was horrible. I don't even want to think about it. Like your story, that's mine. Yeah, I can't even think about that face.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the car hits, and you brace yourself for the hit, but no hit comes.
Wow.
Okay, so now the car stops because my mom is like, and I mean, because you're stopping, and my mom just sits there, And now she's got both hands on the steering wheel now. And I look at her, and she looks at me, and I said, "Did you see that?" And it was one of those, "Did you see that?" And she looks, she's darting around and she's looking. She looks to the side, she looks in the rearview mirror. She looks out the, her other side mirror, and she said, "The water's not moving." And as a kid, I'm not thinking what that really meant at the
Yeah.
time.
So it's still somewhere like under or behind the car.
Exactly.
And you didn't hit it and
And
kill it, so you probably just made it really mad now. So it's like,
exactly. And so she's sitting there and I guess she's trying to process this. And I mean, like I said, I rarely saw my mom my mom was 5'4", and she'd go up against my dad at the worst times, as protect her kids and stuff. I mean, I've seen my mom battle, and my mom was scared, and that scared me, you know. And she's trying to look out that lever window, and she can't see anything. And she's repeating everything she says, like, the water isn't moving, the water isn't moving. And then she says, "It's under the car."
oh my God.
And she just got this look on her face and hit the gas and took off a little bit, and then started looking around again, like maybe it was under the car and she was going to leave it behind. She says, "There's nothing on the road." And the woman does something to this day I cannot even fathom why. She says again, "It's under the car." She opens the car door.
No.
Now, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like in the horror movie. No, don't go in the
She-
shack. The killing.
She opens the car door and she goes to put her foot out, and she puts her foot on the thing, and I'm froze. I'm froze. I have no idea what's happening now. And then she just got this look on her face, and she quick pulls her legs and slams the door. Man, that Mustang took off for all it was worth, and just I don't even want to cuss now, but I mean, just for all it was worth. And man, we got home faster than we've ever gotten home any other time. We pull up that gravel driveway, and she's not saying anything, and I'm not saying it. I'm holding on for everything I've got. She pulls in the driveway, and she says, she looks at me. She says, "Stay in the car." Now, I don't know what she was thinking. Is it hanging on to the underneath? I don't know what she was thinking, but she said, "Stay in the car," and you stayed. She opens the car door and she gets out. She walks around the back and she's looking. She walks around the front. And I see her in front of the car, and she puts her hand like she's feeling the top of the hood of the car and the bumper. And then she just looks at me in the window, puts both hands on the car, put her head down and cried.
Wow.
And after I got out of the car, look, she says, "There's nothing on the car. We didn't hit it. We had to hit it." And that's one that you did not talk about again. What the heck was that?
Yeah, I've got one in one of my books, very similar. I think it was in Georgia, though. Swampy area. People were following one car behind another, and the lead car hit something that they said looked like a cross between a wet Black Panther or a man in a wetsuit crawling across the road. They hit whatever it was, and there was blood everywhere all over the car. And when they got to their destination, there was actually so much blood that they went back to check and make sure that they had killed somebody that was literally crawling across the road in a wetsuit, and they couldn't find a thing. But yeah, anytime I think you've got a swamp or an area like that, I mean, in Bishopville, South Carolina, you've got what's the swamp monster there that they have, looks like they're the creature from the Black Lagoon or whatever. And then there in the Great Dismal Swamp, not only do you have Civil War soldiers that disappeared, I mean, entire units that disappeared, you had slaves that escaped into there and never came out. And there's look on how many species of reptile and things in there, things that will probably eat people if it gets a chance. And I bet there's quicksand too. So I think anywhere you've got that much kind of stuff going on, there's just some. But yeah, if you were a kid in the 60s and you watched TV, you knew to stay away from quicksand because it would kill you.
Absolutely.
That was one of my biggest fears when I was a kid playing in the woods. It's like, I hope I don't get in any quicksand. And you'd see a mud puddle or something. I wonder if that's quicksand. And you throw a rock in it, see if it would sink.
I didn't want anything to do with a marsh or a moor either.
Yeah.
I don't even know what a moor is, but I don't want nothing to do with it. And it's on the moors. It's in the moors.
Yeah,
the banshee. The banshee will
Frankenstein
get
was
you.
there. The Wolfman was on the moors. Yeah, everything was on the moors. And then
And the fog's in the
in
fog.
Britain, you had the Moors murderers. Myra
Ugh.
Hindley, and I can't remember the guy's name. That was where they hid their victims, was on the moors, because nobody with any sense would go out there in the
Go
first
away.
place. So,
Phew. Oh, I know. I mean, the stuff that I've seen out there. I saw this platypus duck thing that I don't even want to drive in the country. I lived way out, and I was 35, 40 mile from home, and it was
uh,
the last 20 of it was country cornfield, and you didn't want to stop. It's like, I think if I ever had a flat tire, I would have rode the rim all the way home.
Yeah,
I mean, you
I've
just,
seen things like that were out of place. I remember once in the woods when I was a kid, I saw a coral snake. I know it was a coral snake. It looked just like the ones in the encyclopedia, and it took off through the woods before I could get somebody to come back and see it or kill it. Well, there's not any coral snakes in Tennessee. The nearest state that has them, I think, is Florida or maybe coastal Georgia or somewhere like that. But I saw a coral snake in the woods. I know I did. It looked at me and then it took off, and I was like, and those are poison, So it's like,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. I mean, it's stuff that's out of place, and you wonder. But then again, they might be looking at us and going, "We're out of
Yeah,
place."
yeah. Where am I? I was at the beach a minute
Yeah.
ago, but
But
there's a
you know
famous
you're in
picture.
some. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, there's a famous picture from I think it's the late 1950s, Middle Tennessee, of a kangaroo bounding through a cornfield. I mean, it's a very clear picture of a kangaroo that a farmer
Wow.
took. Something was out there, raising a ruckus in his cornfield, and the dogs are going nuts. He goes out there with a flash camera, and he's got a picture of a kangaroo in his cornfield. And that's the whole cryptozoology thing that fascinates me, with not just animals but anything that shows up where it shouldn't be. That's I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, come visit me. I'm in the Pine Barrens. You know what we got out here.
I've got some stories about the Pine Barrens
I
in
don't
my
want to
book.
hear them.
One of the most interesting, and the guy didn't even tell me that. He was telling me another story. He says the strangest thing I ever saw in the Pine Barrens, there was a guy wearing nothing but a clown mask and a pair of tube socks picking his way through a briar patch. He's like, but that's another story. And then he goes on to tell me something else. I want to hear about the guy in the clown mask and the tube socks.
And there were two socks.
And that's
Oh,
it.
that's
Nothing
funny,
else. And he's in
man.
a briar patch. So that had to be a memorable experience.
There's a
Everybody
story
involved.
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
But
That's
no,
for sure.
the story I have in my book, a guy found a pizza in the Pine Barrens, a fresh pizza. Like, it wasn't in a box or anything. It was just sitting on the ground. And he's like, that's like a half smart monster. Like, I'll put a pizza down, he'll go for the pizza and I'll catch him. And he's like, I'm not going to go anywhere near a pizza I found sitting on the ground. But it was a whole
that's funny.
fresh pizza just sitting on the ground. No box, nothing nearby. He's like,
Trying to
I was
trap
afraid to go
somebody.
near it. Somebody's trying, something's going to get me if I go near the pizza.
Wow. Isn't that something? They be hunting us.
There's some
Oh,
strange
gosh.
things in the Pine Barrens there. And then New Jersey's a great state anyway. I mean, you got Shades of Death Road. You got
Oh, yeah.
all
Yep.
kinds of things there that I can think of that.
We had green lights growing up. We had Green Light Cemetery and Albino Road. Albino Road, and that was
And,
everybody's got an Albino Road or something like that. You can't
Don't
go
they
down
have
the road.
like one of the tiny town type things too, where it's all midgets
Yes.
who live in small houses? Now
Yeah,
that would scare me. When I was a child, I had an aversion to midgets or dwarves or anybody that was smaller than they should have been. The Wizard of Oz was a horror movie for me.
yeah. Or well, I always, because of the pug. I don't even want to say it. Pugwudgies.
Oh, yeah.
Indian lore and all the different Indian lore. I mean, we grew up, we heard stuff about it. My grandmother, not often, but enough for me to remember, would take me out in the woods and show me, because she was trying to teach me herbal stuff, sassafras tea for an upset peppermint and all that other stuff. And she would pick it and tell me. But see, the problem was my grandmother she was born in 1890. So she grew up in that time where you didn't tell people you were Native American, because when she was a little girl, you'd still, there was an adverse reaction to that, because, you'd get your land took or your home, I mean, she grew up in that time.
Yeah,
And,
like my great grandfather that married into, that's where the Indian, the Cherokee on my dad's side comes from. They tried to run him out of town for marrying a Native American woman.
Wow.
yeah, exactly. exactly. And then she would, like I said, she would take me out in the woods. We'd be out in the middle of nowhere. Well, not in the middle of nowhere, but in the woods, away from everybody. And she would lean down and she'd whisper it. Now, this is sassafras. And she's not telling me anything bad. She's saying, this is sassafras. If you pick it, you make a tea and all that. And she's looking around her like if somebody heard her, something bad could happen to her.
Right.
But if you think about it, we're not far from the time, where people were, hung and burned at the stake for, little more than that, or doing herbal cures for, there's many a story about people doing stuff where you actually help the children get sick and, a month later they're accusing you of being, a witch or, worshiping this or that and, it's trouble. So just that on top of being Native American, we had to watch it. And that's probably one of the reasons where I put it right out front, because I'm coming from that generation. I'm Native American here. I was Native before it was cool.
Yeah. Something I want to ask you about that I had an elder tell me, and see if you've ever heard the same thing, that if there's anything nearby that will hurt you, like a snake or, say, poisonous berries or poison ivy or something like that, also nearby to that will be something that can cure or heal that. Have you ever heard
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely true.
That in areas where you find snakes, you find like snakeweed or whatever it's called, which will cure poison snake bite. I've heard that, but I didn't know if there's any true
if you can
veracity
probably
to it or
look
not.
it up. I don't know all the Latin terms for everything because some people know everything by Latin terms and stuff. But growing right next to poison sumac is the cure for poison sumac. Yes, that happens very often. It's almost
heard that at a powwow one night, and I thought, now that's really cool. But I just never really checked into it.
Yeah, and there's been many a times where I've gone to when I was first getting into it, because if you're not raised into it, coming in as an outsider, that's exactly what you are,
Mm-hmm.
And so you're taken in very slowly, and you're tested on many things, and one of the things that I would get is like, gosh, this is, tobacco is sacred, it's used for ceremonies and things like that. It's different. It's just everything's different, And one of the neatest things I ever saw, have you ever heard of the trading blanket?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And that there's a lot of rules to that. You can't step on the blanket. You can only kneel. And basically what it is, for people who don't know, it's just a blanket that's laid out, and then there's a red cloth in the center. And anything that's of a high, I want to say sacred value, but we don't really use sacred as the same thing. Like the earth is sacred, different things are sacred. It's not the same as a lot of people would use it for, but it's precious. Let's just say precious. It has to go on the red cloth. And basically it's just your regular trading game. Somebody throws down, hey, I've got this crystal, and then I've got like this necklace I made, and this is what I want to trade. What do you give me for it? And everybody throws out what they're willing to trade you for it, and then you pick the one that you want, and then it goes on around. It's kind of neat. Mm-hmm. And when something is thrown on the red cloth, it was amazing to me, because the things that are held most precious are things that most people would walk over every day. Right. Like it might be an eagle feather, or it might be a rock of some kind. And one of the coolest things I saw that was laid down were 6 seeds from 100-year-old, like a traditional seed plant of tobacco. Wow. So it was like this one plant, and then we got the seeds, and we grew a plant, we got the seeds, and it went on for like 100 years from this one family. And when that thing came up, people stood up and went, oh, and started digging in their pockets and in their bags.
So true heirloom seeds there, yeah.
Yeah. People, and the blanket was full that night because everybody was throwing everything off, and the guy that got that, it's like this guy walked off with a big bag of things. This guy walked off with a tiny bag of seeds, just skipping. He was so happy. So,
and he got the good deal, yeah.
Yeah, he got the good trade. Good trade. That's what we say. Good trade. But yeah, it's very sacred. It's like I was saying earlier with my grandmother. She very rarely spoke about it. She would tell you, but she would like go and make sure the doors were locked and stuff. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. Like somebody might hear to talk about traditions and stuff. And her mom was, of course, my great grandmother, and she was the one who would sit me down. My grandfather built a little house in Belmar, New Jersey, and when my mom and I went on our own. We stayed there for a little bit, and I was in kindergarten, first grade. The bus used to drop me off right in front of the house, and it was so cool because on hot days, I would run right down the cellar, and there was a root cellar there, and big baskets of apples and canned items, and it was a neat place because it was always nice and cool down there. And my great grandmother, had a sewing room, and it had that old Singer sewing machine that you'd push the pedal and the needle would go up and down. And my grandfather he was a machinist, and he had a little shop down there. So it was a cool place to go and grab an apple and, talk to my great grandmother. And she would sit there and she would tell me Native American language, a little bit of Native American language. She'd say, never forget who you are and where you come from, and remember these traditions. And she would let me brush her hair and braid it. She taught me how to braid hair, and she would let me sit on her lap and work the sewing machine, and she would tell me stories about the dresses she was hemming and all the things she wanted to make, quilts she wanted to make, and different things like that. Really tell me the traditions. And she would say, you can't go around and tell everybody this because some people don't, they don't want to hear it, is what she would say.
And it's weird that you mentioned that, but my grandmother, the Gypsy Witch, that was the exact same thing she would do to me. She had a sewing room. It had been like a dining room at one time. She had taken it over for quilting. She would get me alone in there and tell me these things about the paranormal or about certain superstitions and stuff. And she would say, and I was her favorite, and she'd say, now don't tell your cousins, don't tell my other grandkids about this. And she would either give me $1 or a chocolate bar or something like that. This is to keep quiet about it. And it's just almost the same reverence, it's like.
Exactly.
And it just, that used to scare me. I was afraid of her when I was little because she looked like a witch. She was old, kind of hunched over, and looked like she was made out of beef jerky or something. She's
all that wisdom, right? I mean, pick you out. Just like,
and that was one of the reasons I decided to collect these stories. Was when at her funeral, I just had an epiphany there. I'm looking down on her in her coffin, and first I thought of her hands and how still they were, and how busy they'd always been before. Anytime I saw her, because she cooked and sewed, and she had 10 kids, so there's always something going on. They had a dairy farm, and I thought, the hands are still now. And then I started thinking about all the stories and things she told me, and I thought, a lot of that will die with me with her because I was the only one that it was told to. So if I don't assume that mantle and pass these stories on, they're gone forever. So that was kind of when and where I really decided to start
to write them down,
to at least collecting those for myself, if nothing else. And then much later in life, decided to make a book out of it.
So many other people enjoy it. People that are going to listen to this are enjoying it, and they're going to connect it into their lives. And that's what's so cool about this and the stuff that Zariah is doing and other podcasts, that we're able to talk about this stuff now. And it's almost like we're itching to get it out because we had to keep it quiet for so long. You had your grandmother lean into you and say, now don't tell anybody else. She picked you out of the pack, she to tell you and not your cousins or anything else. They see us. You said in another interview, she said you had a shining.
Yeah, I just have a shine to me.
Yeah.
And supposedly I was born
with
a caul over my face, or with the afterbirth still over me. My grandmother was there. My mom was knocked out on whatever they had given her. So my mom didn't know, but my grandmother swore I was born with the afterbirth still over my face. And that's supposed to indicate a special child or second sight. And that was what she based her picking me on, because she had lots and lots of grandkids. But I was the one that got chosen.
Yeah, The Shining, and they'll watch it, and then they'll tell you that one can handle this. We're going to give it to that one because that one will keep it, and that one will do something with it. And that's the same thing that happened to me. And they call it the veil. In fact, we didn't call it The Shining. We called it the veil. They born with the veil, and that's exactly just another way they called it. But like your grandmother picked you out, my great grandmother picked me out.
Yeah. And another word she used to use besides shine, she would say you're kind. And I always thought she meant, you're sweet or you're nice or whatever. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized she was meaning you are of a kind. You are a certain kind of person. And that kind of blew me away when I figured out what she was talking about.
Isn't that neat? And we'll get these revelations almost like when we're supposed to, like when we can handle it, because all that stuff she taught me and all those things she said, and she was not able to speak it, when she was around and able to admit it, because they were, like I said, they were scared. for people that don't know, you got to think back, just
Mhm.
like, any group that was ever enslaved or anything like that, you have to keep certain things like learning how to read and things like that hushed. And it was a big deal. And just like the guy with, the ghost with the red ribbon, because I was pulled from my family and there was very little intent, there was letters and Christmas cards and things, but it wasn't like today where you could get on Facebook and talk, and it was different. It was different.
Right.
So it was 20, 23 years till I got these, realizations. And at, one of these reunions, I'm sitting there with my older sisters and stuff, and I was telling what I just told you about, and you and Zariah, about the sewing machine and all that. And my once older sister looked at me. She goes, "Wait a minute, you were in kindergarten?" I said, "Kindergarten, first grade." She said, "And great Nana, she helped you sew. She taught you how to use that sew." I said, "Yeah." And she looked at me. She goes, "You're lying." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not lying. She taught me about the red dress that, she had with Grandpa. She was letting the hem out. I told her all the things. And at first, I really thought, my first thought was she's jealous because she didn't tell her these things.
Hmm.
That wasn't it at all. She looks at me and she says, okay. She says, first of all, those stairs, the reason that your grandmother wouldn't go down those stairs and Pop had to carry all the canned goods down there, she said she was scared of those stairs. I had those old wooden stairs. You know those kind that if you lean forward, you're going down and
Yeah,
you're
they're
scared
really
of
steep
because,
ones. Yeah.
yeah, and they're wood. My grandpa built them with his own hands. So the kind that, like, you go down, you got to pull the string to turn on the light halfway down. So it's halfway
Uh,
in the dark.
yep.
And, they open behind them so something can grab you from behind, grab your ankle. So you're scared all around.
It's
And I
almost like
thought that's,
walking up and down a ladder. It's not quite straight up and
yeah,
down. But I know
exactly.
exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
And I thought that's what she meant. Well, she was scared of the stairs. And she goes, no, you don't understand. She said, you were in kindergarten. That made you 6, 7, 8 years old, first grade. I said, yeah. She goes, well, wait a minute. Great Nana, when you were 4, Great Nana fell down those stairs, broke her hip, went to the hospital. She went into rehab and she died of complications. You never sat with grandma in the cellar and learned how to sew and learn Native American or braided her hair because she was dead. And I looked at her, I said, yeah, I did.
Hmm.
Wow.
Slipped one in on you, didn't I? Yes, I did too. And it was so important to that woman that after death, she picked me out to tell, you are Native American. Do not forget. How about that?
Wow, that's awesome.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that is.
Yep. My sister didn't talk to me for a long time after that. She still don't believe me. But there it is. And I'll speak I'll say a little something to her. She goes, you know, you don't know that. You don't know that. But that's just the thing, I mean, things like that happen to us and we don't even realize it, very much like the imaginary kids that we played with. And
Right. That's what
they
I was
weren't
thinking of when you
imaginary.
said that. Like, but I did play with those kids in the yard. I remember. I mean, I saw them. I don't remember ever touching them or anything like that. But I
Mhm,
mean, we played together. We did things. We talked. I
mhm.
interacted with these kids, and then to be told, no, there were no kids that lived nearby when we lived there. And I'm like, yeah, there
Mm,
were. There were two kids
yeah.
that lived in the woods, not in the
And
woods, but they had to go through the woods to get home.
to go your whole life and not realize it till that moment. I mean,
Yeah.
that was what was that? She
Yeah. I
died
was.
3 years before I ever even stayed at that house.
Yeah.
But it was so real to the point of being able to brush her hair and
And you
feel.
know that it's real, and nobody can tell you otherwise. That's like you burn your hand on a stove eye, and then somebody says, "Oh, that's not hot; it won't burn you." It's like,
Yep.
yeah, well, look, I've got the scars to prove it, and that's kind of the
You
way
know that
this
you
is. It
know.
just what it, I
Yeah.
mean, and that's why I never question anybody else's experience because who am I to say what you have or haven't experienced? Because
Yeah.
I know a lot of the things that I've personally experienced that I'm sure I sound like a nutcase or something, but I know what I saw, I know what
Yeah.
happened.
And
Exactly.
it's hard for me. Yeah, for years I didn't want to say any of these things, but much for the same reason that, you started writing them down. My main objective was, I've learned things that I know, And unless I'm completely daffy and everybody around me is daffy that has experienced this, there's something going on. There's something out there. And people around the world, I think that's one of the reasons that it's really taken off since we've all got the internet and we're able to speak it. People are putting their experiences out there and they're kind of meshing up. And we've got little pieces. We found little pieces tonight,
Mm-hmm.
of we're talking about the room and how it goes, the death that you were with your grandmother and you felt the room very much like I did with my mother, even though it was weeks before she was passed.
Mhm.
And like I said, I don't even know if that nun was real. I mean, a person alive. I mean, it could have been one that was, you know, different.
Makes you
I
question
I'm
things
in a
and pay
hospice, and I'm
attention to
telling you,
things.
huh? I'm sorry.
It makes you question things and makes you pay attention to things too.
Absolutely, it does. And you find out all these different things. We still have questions, but that was one of the things I got in, and I think I see all these people going out, and I'm not against it, and people do their own thing their way, but you go into these houses and they're provoking and all this just to get evidence. And I think I talked to Zariah about it before about I'm kind of at the point where, I when I go to play, I don't even bother taking pictures or EVPs because it's almost to me, I'm not there for the evidence. I know
Right.
it's there. And at this point, I think we've almost out teched ourselves. You can watch the best ghost video you've ever seen, but look at CG on movies,
Right.
and
Right.
there's all these apps and
And you will
things.
hear that. I mean, if I took a picture of a ghost in my living
Yep,
room and I put it on the internet right now, half or more of the people are going to say, "Oh, that's Photoshop. You're a liar." So it's
exactly,
just like, why even bother? I know what I saw, and
exactly. And then,
and I
yeah, in
used to do
my
the same
case,
thing in the '80s and the '90s. I went out and investigated places. I took photos. I was a paranormal investigator before there was such a thing,
yeah,
and now I have no interest in doing that.
right,
And I've had people ask me about these stories. I mean, you don't vet these stories, you don't investigate. No, that's not my job. I'm just retelling the stories the way they were told to me. A lot of this
right,
stuff happened decades ago, and these people are dead. And if I proved it or disproved it, it wouldn't be any more or less, or it
right.
wouldn't be any more entertaining. It'd be like, well, Joe Smith was a liar because he told me this when I was a
Right.
kid, and it couldn't be real because ghosts don't exist. What fun would that be? So I'd rather say,
Yeah,
this is
I
the
was told a lot
story
of
that
things didn't
Joe told me
exist.
that curled my toes. So, well,
Right,
yeah.
I was told a
What
lot of
about the
things
things you
that
were
didn't
told that
exist.
exist? Santa Claus
Yeah,
and the Easter Bunny, and then you find out
amen.
those weren't real, and then it came.
Right,
I read a
and that's
really interesting paper once where it said Santa Claus is the reason kids get into drugs because your parents start you out believing in Santa Claus, and then you find out that's not real, and
the
they say, well,
magic isn't real.
they must be wrong about drugs too. So,
Well, I must be crazy because I still believe in Santa Claus.
Well,
I always tell my kids that I always believe it was real. I understand completely, but see, and my things too is more on the compassion part of it. I have absolutely nothing wrong. I know some great paranormal groups out there. I know people that
uh,
even have ex-police and real investigators and everything, and they go at it with the utmost respect and science and trying to learn. But to me, for me personally, one thing we found out just trying to get through on Skype, I have no technical abilities whatsoever. I am a sticks and stones kind of girl. First of all, I would know how to fake a picture if I tried. I took a picture in Gettysburg when I went up. I'm sure everybody knows the story of the wheat field. I mean, they're all horrible battles, but once you start getting into the details and reading the journals and the diaries and listening to some of these stories of what these poor guys went through, I mean, we've become desensitized, I think, in some ways. Some people, you see so much all the time, we keep just, being able to glaze over it. But when you really get into the heart of it, the stuff they went through, you know, and do you know the story of the wheat field at all? Basically, what it was a 2.5 day battle, and of course, both sides across this I want to say almost a mile wheat field. I could be off on that. And the wheat was probably about shoulder height. And you figure it's what, 96 degrees in the shade? It's July, in Pennsylvania. And you're wearing wool. So already it's a bad scene. And all this is going on. And of course, in the center of the field at night, they would break it up and they would go back to their side. So all the wounded is left there. And of course, moaning and groaning and in pain and calling out for their buddies and people to come and get them. And they can't go out there because they'll be shot. And some cannon fire in the day um, had hit a farm and busted open the fences on a hog farm.
Oh,
Now, what do hogs do?
I know what's coming. They'll eat anything they can find.
Right, and these poor guys are laying there thinking, they're hearing rustling in the grass, thinking their buddies are coming for them, and they had to fight for all they were worth with whatever strength they had left to fight these hogs off. And it's just a horrible, horrible thing. And just, and I'm standing out there in the middle of this wheat field. And I had told my sons, when I tell my sons, you go off there, Mama got to go do something. I had to go pay homage, And I'm standing in the middle of this wheat field. There's nobody out there. I can see my boys way off to the side down on the road reading a plaque or something. And I just stood in the middle and I just put my hands out. And I can't even tell you the oppression. It felt like somebody standing on my chest. You know the feeling. And I said, guys, there's nothing I can do, to ease this. I can't hear you. I can feel it, but I have no communication. I can't hear, if they're stuck. Sometimes I hear if they're crossed, but anyway, like I said, very little ability, just emotion and compassion. So I said, what can I do, to ease a little bit of this? And I thought to myself, and the thought came up to my head, if I could just, I'm a blues singer too. So I said, if I could just sing a song that would relate to both sides. And I thought back about what they were going through back in the day and what songs, I picked Amazing Grace. And I sang at the top of my lungs, and I sang 2 verses of Amazing Grace. And you could just feel it lift a little bit. And I said, with your kind permission, I want to remember, I treat it with respect. I'm talking to people here, I don't bang on the rock and I'll give you candy, like some of this stuff. It takes energy to do that. You have to be respectful, And I stood there, I said, with your kind permission, I would like to take a picture of where I am so I can remember this moment. And I hope what I did eased your pain, and I want to let you know that what you did was not forgotten here. And I like to remember. And I felt like it was okay. I asked permission. I just took my camera and I did 360. I took 7 shots in a circle. I click, 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 click. And I put my camera in there and I said another prayer. And I walked to the car, my kids got in the car, and we left Gettysburg. And I'm in the car, talking about everything. And I picked up my camera, and now we're easing back on the road, so I'm looking through my pictures. And I've got one side of the wheat field, I got a fence, and I can see 3 heads popping up over the fence, and they're not in it before, and they're in it in the next one, and they moved, which tells me there's something. Now, could it be matrixing? Maybe. Maybe not. I have no way of proving one way or the other, and I don't know that enough about pictures, but I felt like I had something. And then nothing. I see my kids. There's a picture of the side of the field and the road, and my son's standing off down the road. And then I turn again, and the picture that I took that would be the length of the field, there's nothing but a solid pink mist. And I know nothing about that. I get home and I start looking, because you hear about colored orbs and mists might be mean different things. Now, who comes up with this? What kind of research will tell you that a blue orb is this? And I got nothing. But it said a mist or an orb that is pink means accommodating spirit, meaning like it's calm, or in touch with God or love. So I'm like, hey, maybe Amazing Grace did something, maybe not. But there's lots of accounts of pictures being taken in the wheat field where people will get mists and things like that. Now, I wasn't even facing the sun. Nobody was smoking. You go through all those things of debunking. Right. But I know I didn't do anything. And I know that none of the other pictures had it in it. So that's just the thing. I could put that out and go, this is what I got. But people are going to say, well, somebody had a cup of coffee, and then like a pink gel in front of your... Why would you go
It's-
through all
I
that?
feel so sorry for some of the debunkers too. It's like kind of like what Einstein said about miracles, that some people never see miracles and other people see them every way or every day. So it's just,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
just the way I am. Why would, if it is what it is, then that's great. But if it's not, who cares? Just
Right.
such
Well,
a,
I
a
think
killjoy. To
exactly, and skepticism is a very healthy thing. You should be a skeptic about everything, and
right,
I mean,
to
and
a
you should
point,
and you
but
should
where they
debunk
come,
it if you can.
to just automatically debunk something, and
Exactly,
they're not doing their research either. You can't just look at something and tell that it's fake any more than I can look at it and tell you it's real. I
and
think
that's where
true
we've come.
debunking and skepticism, it requires that intelligence, that ability to say,
Right.
okay, this is fake and here's why I think it's fake, not just
Yeah.
oh, that's fake, I can tell by looking at it. No, you can't.
Well, very smart people have been fooled. Wasn't it Sir Arthur Conan Doyle
Yeah,
that
the
got so
Yes.
cognitively
into
fairies, yeah.
and he believed it. Look, I mean, it about
And it,
ruined him.
it basically
You know,
destroyed his career, yeah, but he was convinced that the cognitively fairies were real.
exactly. And in that case, they weren't. And all the different stuff that when I can remember being a kid looking through books and seeing the brown lady of somewhere, but the famous one where she's coming down the stairs.
Uh,
And that the funny one of Lincoln standing behind Mrs. Lincoln.
Hmm.
And you look at it and go, okay, that's fake. There's no way that's real. I mean, it's just so old. And, in all the books, we've come through a time where we've looked at like all the mediums with all the ectoplasm coming out all over the place. And you can
right.
look at that, and go, that's so fake. And we've almost come full circle because you can look at these videos, you can look at these pictures and go, gosh, that's so fake. But it's the stories behind it, it's
Yeah.
the sincerity, it's the,
It's
these
kind of the
people.
same principle, I think. Back then, that type of photography was like computers are now kind of in its infancy, and people didn't know how it works. So it's like, well, there's a picture of it, it must exist. And it's
Right.
kind of the same thing now. Not everybody knows how to do things in Photoshop or to fake things in a
Exactly.
video or whatever. So but there are times when you can see something and yeah, it's pretty obviously fake, but still it gives you that just little hint of, well, what if it's not? What if it's,
What if it's
what
not?
if that's my kids playing in the yard with me, that my parents didn't see?
Exactly.
You never know. It's hard to
What if?
discount anybody else's experience.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
It's like also with the David Paulides and any of this stuff where you look at this, and I think I said this to Zariah the last time we spoke too. It's like, okay, well, you have all this stuff, you can bring it all in. Aliens, you can bring in every kind of science, normal, paranormal, anything you want to bring in. And you can look at it as a group and go, all right, well, if nine out of 10 of it is fake, you got
Then
that
there's
one.
that one. There you go. And it's always that
That
one.
that's all you need is that
And
one, and that
regardless of
says
who's doing
something
it or
going on.
what's happening or why it's happening, it's still happening. People are
It's
still
still happening.
disappearing and being found in places that have been searched like the day before thoroughly, like
Yeah.
the body was placed there. So however, whoever's doing it, it's still happening.
Mm-hmm.
We just can't
Absolutely.
agree on a who or a how or what, or maybe, a multiple thing. I mean, I've heard UFOs, alien abduction, Bigfoot, serial killers, some kind of government predator-like creature, that can hide, and who knows? But
Well, like
it's still,
Zariah has said 100 times, the thing is the mind-boggling thing of it, and I think you'll agree, Zariah, because I believe this is how you said it, was it's just like the paranormal or ghosts or whatever. Once you think you've got it, then there's these 10 other cases that throw all that out of the water.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
watching one of those forensic things on TV. And that's what I always try to teach, my sons or anybody that wants to learn. It's like, boy, you're watching that forensic show back in the day. That's all we had, before all the Big Bang stuff, the DNA and everything, before the OJ trial.
yeah, no two
So you're watching
experiences
that
exactly
and
the same.
right, and you think you've got it, and you're right up to the last 20 minutes of that show. And if you were on the jury, you'd convict that guy.
Right.
And then the last 5 minutes, they come out with that last piece of evidence that throws everything out of the water. And whoa, it wasn't him.
Had that happen, it's, oh, I know it was this guy. I know how he did
Yeah.
it. I know why he did it. I know where he did it. And then it's like,
Right.
nope, all that was wrong. It was this person that you didn't even think
That's-
about. And they,
That's
like,
the polite
wow.
to me. It
Yeah.
just throws you completely out of the water. And about, like I said, the reason I started doing this and started putting the word out is basically I wanted to warn people. One, don't go around just playing with Ouija boards wide open if you don't know what you're doing. You know, because you're opening that door, and if you don't know how to close it, you know,
Absolutely. It's
and
like the
I
people
mean,
that
it's not
play with spell books and things like that.
exactly,
You can
exactly.
conjure things up that you don't have the power to get rid of if you don't know what you're doing.
Listen, I've
I've
gone to
seen
help
that
people
happen.
that knew what they were doing,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying don't, but understand it a little bit. Get some knowledge, and not from I don't have it, but go get some else. I know enough that if I'm going to go into a place, take protection with you, and know a little bit about it. You just don't want to go around playing with just like anything.
And probably
And
like me, you learned that the hard way, didn't you?
exactly. I got a Ouija board story, boy. Somebody didn't
Well,
want me touching it.